The conference room was filled with the usual buzz of tech enthusiasts and corporate giants, all eagerly awaiting the keynote speaker. Elon Musk stood at the front of the room, preparing for yet another speech about the future of space travel, AI, and electric vehicles. But today was different. Something felt off, as though the usual rhythm of his life was about to be interrupted. A hush fell over the crowd when the doors at the back of the room opened, and in walked a child. An 8-year-old boy, dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans, confidently made his way to the stage, his eyes locked on Musk's. The audience stared, confused. Who was this kid? Was he part of the show? Elon's first instinct was to dismiss the child, but there was something in the boy's eyes, something unmistakable. A sharpness, a brilliance. He had never seen such a look before, especially not in someone so young. As the boy stood at the podium, Elon raised an eyebrow. "Are you here to present?" Musk asked, his voice laced with a touch of amusement. The boy didn't flinch. Instead, he gave a slight nod. "Yes, Mr. Musk, I'm here to show you something." Musk chuckled. "And what exactly would that be?" He glanced at the audience, who was equally baffled. The child's fingers moved with surprising speed, pulling out a tablet from his backpack. With a few taps, a 3D hologram of a rocket appeared in front of him, floating mid-air. It was a model of the SpaceX Starship, but with one distinct difference. It had a propulsion system that was radically different from anything Musk had ever seen. It was, to put it mildly, a breakthrough. The audience gasped in disbelief. Musk's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the floating model. He leaned in closer, studying the intricate design, the sleek curves, and the technology embedded in the hologram. It was genius. "How did you?" Musk began, but the boy interrupted him. "I've been studying your work, Mr. Musk," the boy said, his voice calm but filled with confidence. "And I think you've been missing something." Musk blinked, struggling to comprehend. "Who are you?" he asked, a hint of challenge creeping into his tone. "I'm Jaden," the boy said simply, "and I'm here to help you make your dreams come true." The audience was stunned into silence. Musk, never one to show surprise easily, felt something shift within him. He was intrigued and a little shaken. This kid, no older than his own children, had just shown him something that not only challenged his work, but potentially surpassed it. Elon Musk, the man who had revolutionized space travel and electric vehicles, was now confronted by an 8-year-old boy whose intelligence and potential seemed limitless. A sense of discomfort gnawed at him. Could this child truly be more advanced than him? And if so, what did that mean for his own legacy? Jaden's eyes didn't waver from Musk's as the child continued. "I know you want to make humanity a multi-planetary species, but your vision is too limited. The future of space exploration isn't just about getting to Mars. It's about what happens after. What comes next is bigger than rockets. It's bigger than anything you've imagined." Musk felt a pang in his chest. The audacity of this boy. The challenge. For a moment, time seemed to stretch out, and in that silence, a question lingered in Musk's mind. What if this boy is right? Jaden paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then, he smiled, just slightly, a hint of mischief dancing in his eyes. "But don't worry, Mr. Musk. I'm not here to take over. I'm here to help you see things differently." The crowd broke into applause, but Musk's mind was racing. His thoughts were a blur of calculations, questions, and doubts. What had just happened? As he looked at the boy standing before him, Musk realized that the world might be on the cusp of a monumental shift. And it wasn't just going to be about rockets and electric cars anymore. This child, Jaden, was a force to be reckoned with, a new kind of genius. And Musk had to decide whether to see him as a competitor or a collaborator. The tension in the room was palpable, but the question that lingered in Musk's mind was clear. What happens next will shock you. Jaden had always been different. From the moment he could talk, he was asking questions no one had the answers to. His mother, a single parent working 2 jobs to make ends meet, often found herself at a loss. But she never gave up on him. She knew there was something extraordinary about her son. It wasn't just his intelligence that set him apart. It was his ability to think about the world in a way no one else did. When other kids his age were playing with action figures or watching cartoons, Jaden was dissecting old electronics, taking apart broken computers to see how they worked. He would spend hours with a screwdriver in hand, fixing things that most adults couldn't. His mother, Carla, would often sit by and watch as he worked, her face a mix of pride and disbelief. "What are you going to do with all this knowledge, Jay?" she'd ask, always trying to keep his feet on the ground despite the genius that seemed to flow so naturally from him. "I'll change the world, Mom. I just need the right people to listen," Jaden would reply, his voice calm and sure. Despite his brilliance, Jaden's life hadn't been easy. They lived in a neighborhood where hope was in short supply. Most of his classmates were more focused on surviving school than dreaming about the future. For Jaden, though, every challenge was an opportunity. He saw the world's problems not as obstacles, but as puzzles waiting to be solved. Carla did her best to support his dreams, even when it meant sacrificing her own. She had always told him, "You are meant for something bigger than this place." And though Jaden believed in his mother's words, he didn't fully understand what she meant. Not yet. At school, Jaden was often the odd one out. He was the youngest in his class by 2 years, and the other students had trouble relating to him. They didn't understand why he would rather read about quantum physics than play basketball, or why he would spend hours drawing out designs for machines no one had ever heard of. The few friends he had were older, much like his mother, a small group of mentors who encouraged his growth, even when the rest of the world told him he was too young, too different. It was during one of these mentorships that Jaden's potential truly began to take form. A retired engineer, Mr. Thompson, took Jaden under his wing, teaching him the fundamentals of design, coding, and how to see the world as a complex, interconnected system of parts. "Most people see things as they are, Jaden," Mr. Thompson would say, "but you have the mind to see things as they could be." Jaden soaked up the lessons like a sponge, his mind constantly working, building connections that were beyond his peers. And while he loved the process of learning, there was one thing Jaden cared about more than anything: making a difference. He spent nights creating blueprints for solar-powered systems and brainstorming ways to make transportation more efficient, all while grappling with the reality of growing up in an environment that didn't always nurture his dreams. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, when he wondered if anyone would ever take him seriously. But the feeling of knowing that his ideas could change the world kept him going, no matter how tough things got. And then, one day, he found Elon Musk. It wasn't a meeting by chance. Jaden had followed Musk's work for years. He'd read every article, watched every interview, and studied Musk's plans for Mars and electric cars. To Jaden, Musk wasn't just a tech mogul. He was someone who dared to think big. Musk's ambitions mirrored his own, but with one difference. Musk had the resources and the platform to make those ideas a reality. Jaden decided then that if he was going to change the world, he would need to start by getting Musk's attention. He needed a breakthrough that would prove he wasn't just some kid with big dreams. He needed to show the world that he was capable of making those dreams come true. But how? He spent months, sometimes skipping school to stay up late working on designs, researching new propulsion methods, and creating prototypes. It was in his small room, surrounded by books and spare parts, that he crafted the propulsion system that had stunned Musk. Jaden knew that if he could show Musk his vision, it would be the first step toward achieving the impossible. And now, standing before the man who had once seemed like an unreachable figure, Jaden had taken that first step. The audience continued to murmur as Jaden finished his presentation, the hologram still hovering in the air. Jaden didn't look at them. His focus remained on Musk, who was now leaning in, clearly intrigued but still guarded. Musk's reputation for being tough was well known, but Jaden wasn't intimidated. He had come this far because of one thing: belief in his own potential. Jaden knew he was different, and today, he was going to show the world just how different he truly was. The tension in the room was palpable. The soft hum of the crowd's whispering mingled with the sound of the air conditioning, but for Jaden, it was like the world had gone silent. His eyes remained fixed on Elon Musk, whose expression was a blend of curiosity and skepticism. Musk had always prided himself on his ability to spot talent and vision, but this was something else entirely. "Okay, Jaden," Musk finally said, breaking the silence. "I'll admit, your design is impressive, but a propulsion system like this doesn't just get built overnight. I'm sure there's more to the story." Jaden stood tall, not faltering under the pressure. I didn't come here to show off my design. I came to offer you a solution. Musk raised an eyebrow, intrigued but clearly wary. A solution? To what, exactly? Jaden leaned in slightly, his voice steady, but his words charged with purpose. To the limits of your current plans. You want to get to Mars, right? But that's just the beginning. The real challenge is what happens once we're there. The transportation, the energy systems, the colonization. None of it works without the right propulsion. And this, he gestured to the floating hologram, is the key to everything. Musk's brow furrowed. What do you mean by the key? And what makes you think this is the solution? Jaden's calm demeanor didn't waver. Right now, you're focused on building rockets that can reach Mars. That's important, but you're missing the next step. If we want to colonize Mars, we need something more efficient. We need an engine that doesn't just get us there. It needs to work on the Martian surface, make the journey back, and be sustainable for the long haul. Musk crossed his arms. Sustainable, you say? And what do you know about the complexities of interplanetary travel that I don't? Jaden met his gaze, unflinching. More than you think. The room had gone from intrigue to tense. Musk's reputation for being a difficult person to work with was well known, but Jaden didn't seem intimidated. And the more Musk listened, the more he realized there was something genuine about the boy's ideas. Musk hesitated, his mind racing. Was Jaden truly onto something? Or was this just the bravado of a young kid who had been playing in a lab too long? Look, kid, Musk said, his voice softening just a little. I don't know what you expect from me, but this isn't a playground. You can't just walk in here and expect me to jump on board with your ideas without some real backing. Real tests, real proof. He paused, then added, your system may look good on a screen, but we need tangible results. This is a multi-billion-dollar project we're talking about. Jaden's expression didn't change. I can show you the math. I can show you the simulations. I'm not just talking about what's possible. I'm talking about what's already been proven. If you listen, we could be talking about technology that would change everything. Musk felt a strange stirring in his chest, a mixture of irritation and admiration. He had spent his entire career working with the brightest minds in the world, but here was an 8-year-old child who had just turned his entire perspective upside down. The crowd watched in stunned silence, the weight of Jaden's words sinking in. Some were impressed, others skeptical, but all were fascinated. This wasn't just some child with a big idea. He was challenging the very core of Musk's vision, and the stakes were higher than anyone had anticipated. Elon took a slow breath, trying to regain control of the situation. All right, Jaden, you've got my attention, but I need more than just words. Show me something real. Jaden nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I'm not here to waste your time, Mr. Musk. I have the data, all of it, but I can't do it alone. Musk raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And what do you need from me? I need you to open a door, Jaden replied simply. I need access to your resources, to your teams, to the technologies you've already developed. Together, we can refine this and make it work. But only if you're willing to take the leap with me. The room went silent again. Musk's eyes narrowed as he processed Jaden's request. It wasn't just an idea. It wasn't a pitch for a job or a partnership. This was a challenge, an invitation to something far bigger than either of them could fully grasp. I don't make decisions like that on a whim, Jaden, Musk said, his tone serious. This isn't just about you and me. It's about the future of humanity. If we take this step, there's no going back. You understand that, don't you? Jaden nodded, his gaze unwavering. I understand. But if we don't take this step, we risk everything. The future you're fighting for. It could fall apart before it even begins. The room buzzed with energy as the weight of Jaden's words hit everyone at once. Musk, the visionary who had dedicated his life to pushing humanity forward, was now faced with a choice that could change everything. Would he take this child seriously, or would he dismiss him as just another wild dreamer? Jaden's words hung in the air, charged with a sense of urgency. This wasn't just about a new propulsion system anymore. This was about the future itself, the future of space exploration, humanity's survival, and a chance for something greater than anything Musk had ever imagined. Elon's gaze shifted as he weighed his options. Could this really be the answer? For the first time in years, he felt a twinge of doubt. The silence in the room was deafening as Elon Musk's mind raced. He had spent years working with the brightest minds, developing cutting-edge technology, and creating innovations that had already pushed the boundaries of human potential. But here, standing in front of him, was an 8-year-old boy offering a solution that could revolutionize everything. It was unsettling. Yet, there was something undeniable about Jaden's presence, his confidence, his clarity. He wasn't just some kid with a fantasy. He was someone who saw the world differently, someone who could change the course of history. Musk broke the silence, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the decision he was about to make. All right, Jaden, you've got access to our teams, but this is your chance to prove it. I'm giving you a window, a small one. If you can show results, we go from there. But no promises beyond that. Jaden's eyes lit up, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Thank you. I won't let you down. Musk nodded, the seriousness of the moment settling in. You've got 6 months. Show me what you've got. The next few days were a blur of activity as Jaden was thrust into the heart of SpaceX's operations. He met with engineers, scientists, and designers who were initially skeptical of the young prodigy. Some dismissed him as just a child playing pretend, while others were cautiously optimistic. But Jaden's sharp intellect quickly earned their respect. He asked questions that no one else had thought to ask. He saw solutions where others saw roadblocks. His ideas weren't just theoretical. They were practical, grounded in real-world physics, and more importantly, they worked. As Jaden delved deeper into the intricacies of Musk's space programs, he began to refine his propulsion system. The data was promising, but it wasn't enough to make the leap from theory to reality. There were glitches, bugs in the simulations, and setbacks that seemed insurmountable. But Jaden didn't back down. If anything, the challenges only fueled his determination. Musk, on the other hand, watched with a mix of amazement and wariness. The more he saw Jaden in action, the more he wondered if he had been right to give this child a chance. There were moments of brilliance, moments when it seemed like Jaden was on the verge of something groundbreaking. And then there were moments of doubt, when Jaden would hit a wall and struggle to move forward. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of testing, Jaden sat alone in a quiet corner of the SpaceX lab, staring at his holographic displays. His fingers hovered over the console, trying to pinpoint the error in his calculations. His mind raced, trying to connect the dots, but the answer remained elusive. The weight of the task he had taken on, of revolutionizing space travel, was pressing down on him. In that moment of frustration, a voice broke through his thoughts. You're close, aren't you? Jaden turned to see Elon Musk standing behind him, arms crossed, watching him intently. There was no judgment in Musk's gaze, only curiosity and something more, an understanding. I don't know, Jaden admitted, his voice quieter than usual. I think I've missed something. There's a variable I haven't accounted for, but I can't figure it out. It's like there's a piece missing. Musk walked closer, examining the data on the screens. You've come a long way, Jaden. I've seen it. But sometimes the answers don't come in a straight line. You need to take a step back, look at things from a different angle. Jaden stared at the data, feeling a sense of frustration bubble up inside him. I don't have time to step back, Mr. Musk. 6 months is all I've got. Musk's expression softened. I get it. But if you're going to change the future, it's not about rushing through it. Sometimes, you need to let the pieces fall into place. Jaden took a deep breath, his fingers still hovering over the controls. He knew Musk was right. Maybe he needed a fresh perspective. Maybe the solution wasn't in the numbers themselves, but in how he approached them. Taking a moment to gather his thoughts, Jaden decided to try a different approach. He cleared the hologram and began to map out the problem differently, from a larger, more abstract perspective. Instead of diving directly into the calculations, he started to visualize the journey, how the propulsion system would work not just on paper, but in the context of real-world space travel, factoring in the challenges of traveling to Mars and back. It wasn't an instant breakthrough, but it was a shift. The more Jaden focused on the system as a whole, the clearer things began to become. Small adjustments, a different order of operations, a change in how the engines interacted with the spacecraft. Slowly, the pieces started to fall into place. Musk watched, intrigued by the process. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of wonder. Jaden wasn't just trying to solve a problem. He was rethinking the entire approach. Musk realized that this was the type of thinking that could change the world. As the night wore on, Jaden worked tirelessly, tweaking and refining the design. He knew that time was running out, but something had shifted in him. It wasn't about impressing Musk anymore. It was about proving to himself that he could do this, that his vision could become a reality. Then, around 3 a.m., the breakthrough came. The propulsion system began to run smoothly in the simulations. The data aligned. The numbers added up. Jaden could hardly believe it. He had done it. He turned to Musk, his face illuminated by the glow of the screens. "It's ready." Musk studied the results, his eyes scanning over the data. There was a long pause as he processed the implications. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but filled with awe. This could work." Jaden smiled, feeling a rush of pride and relief. "I told you I wouldn't let you down." But Musk's expression remained serious. "This is just the beginning, Jaden. The real work starts now. You're not just changing the future of space travel. You're changing the future of humanity." As Musk spoke, Jaden realized that this wasn't just about a propulsion system. It was about something far bigger, about a vision that could take humanity beyond the stars. It was the journey of a lifetime, one that neither of them had fully understood until now. The next steps would be harder, but Jaden felt ready. He had made it this far, and there was no turning back. Together, they were on the verge of something truly extraordinary. The months had passed quickly, and the final moments were upon them. Jaden had dedicated every waking hour to refining his propulsion system, and while the hurdle seemed endless, something about this project had ignited a fire in him, a fire that refused to be extinguished. As the days turned into weeks, he had gone from being the curious child with a big idea to a critical member of SpaceX's team. His simulations were flawless, his designs revolutionary. And yet, despite all the progress, doubt still lingered in the back of his mind. Could they really pull this off? Could this propulsion system actually work in the real world? Or was it just a beautiful theory, a pipe dream that would never leave the lab? In the quiet hours of the night, Jaden often found himself staring at the glowing screens, wondering if the pressure was too much. The idea of failure, the possibility that the entire world would watch and see his vision crumble, was terrifying. But he wasn't the only one feeling the weight of the situation. Elon Musk had been watching him closely. He had seen Jaden grow over the past several months, pushing boundaries, challenging assumptions, and defying every expectation. But Musk also knew the stakes. This wasn't just another project. This was humanity's next giant leap. The fate of Mars, of interplanetary travel, rested on the success of this propulsion system. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Musk sat across from Jaden in the lab late one night. The weight of the world seemed to press on both of them as they sat in silence, the soft glow of the holograms casting long shadows across their faces. It was the first time Musk had truly seen Jaden as something more than just a brilliant child. In that moment, he understood that this was more than a partnership. It was a shared mission, a bond formed by ambition, fear, and an unyielding hope. "You know, Jaden," Musk began quietly, breaking the silence. "When I started SpaceX, I didn't have anyone to believe in me. I was told it was impossible, that no one would ever be able to build a private spacecraft capable of going to Mars. And yet, here we are. You've proven me wrong time and time again, and you're on the verge of doing something even bigger." Jaden looked up, his eyes wide. "I don't want to let you down." "You won't," Musk replied, his voice firm. "No matter what happens, you've already done something incredible. You've redefined what's possible." Jaden absorbed Musk's words, but doubt still gnawed at him. What if the system doesn't work? What if all of this is for nothing? Musk smiled, but it wasn't the confident grin that Jaden had come to associate with the billionaire innovator. It was a softer, more knowing smile. "Failure isn't the end, Jaden. It's just a step on the road to something better. Every great idea comes with its failures, its missteps. It's not about the first attempt. It's about the 100th, the 1000th. It's about the vision, the persistence, and the willingness to keep going." Jaden's eyes dropped to the table, his hands clenched in tight fists. But this is different. This is everything. This could change the future. Musk nodded slowly. Exactly. But that's why we have to try. It's bigger than us now. This is about what we leave behind for the future. If this works, it could mean a new era for humanity. And that's worth every risk. But more than that, it's worth everything we've already done to get here. Jaden felt the weight of those words sink in. It wasn't just about rockets and propulsion systems anymore. It wasn't about proving a point to Musk or anyone else. It was about something bigger than himself, a vision that transcended his fears and doubts. It was about creating a future where humanity could thrive beyond Earth's limits, a future where Mars was no longer a distant dream but a second home. With a deep breath, Jaden stood up from the table, his resolve hardening. I'm ready. Let's do it. Musk stood as well, a determined gleam in his eye. I've never been more ready. The day of the test arrived. SpaceX's facility was buzzing with anticipation as engineers, scientists, and the world's media gathered to witness the culmination of months of work. The atmosphere was thick with excitement and anxiety. No one knew if the propulsion system would work, but everyone knew that this moment was history in the making. If Jaden's system succeeded, it would not only change the future of space exploration, but also set the stage for humanity's colonization of Mars. Jaden stood beside Musk, watching as the engineers prepped the final stages of the system. His heart was pounding, his mind racing through every variable, every possible outcome. This was it, the moment of truth. Musk placed a hand on his shoulder, sensing the tension radiating off the young genius. You've done everything you can, Jaden. Now it's time to let the work speak for itself. Jaden nodded, but the weight of the moment was almost too much to bear. He took a step forward, watching as the countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The engines roared to life. A brilliant burst of light shot out from the propulsion system, and the air around them seemed to vibrate with power. The holograms flickered to life, displaying the data as it raced through the systems. For a moment, it felt like everything had stopped, as if the world itself was holding its breath. And then, slowly, the readings stabilized. The numbers were perfect. The system was working. Jaden let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He looked at Musk, his face alight with disbelief and triumph. It's working. It's really working. Musk's face broke into a rare smile, a look of pride and awe on his face. You did it, Jaden. You changed everything. For a moment, everything seemed to fade away. The pressure, the doubts, the fear. All that mattered was the realization that they had just taken the first step towards something unimaginable, the colonization of Mars. But as Jaden looked out at the system humming with life, a thought crossed his mind. This was only the beginning. The success of the propulsion system sent shockwaves throughout the space community. News outlets worldwide ran stories about the young genius, Jaden, and his groundbreaking achievement. The implications were staggering. Humanity now had the potential to travel beyond Earth's orbit, with Mars becoming an attainable destination. The media hailed him as the next great mind of the space age. But for Jaden, the recognition wasn't the reward. It was the realization that he had made a difference. In the weeks that followed, Musk and Jaden worked together to refine the propulsion system, preparing it for real-world tests. The project had moved beyond the lab. It was now a global mission. Engineers, scientists, and government officials from around the world sought to be part of what was quickly becoming the most important project in human history. Jaden had achieved what many thought impossible, but the pressure to deliver more was just beginning. On a quiet evening, Musk invited Jaden to his office. The air in the room was calm, the hum of the bustling SpaceX facility far in the distance. Musk sat at his desk, reviewing data, but his eyes were fixed on Jaden. The young genius had been a whirlwind of activity since the propulsion system's success, but tonight, Musk wanted to have a different kind of conversation. Jaden, Musk said, his voice uncharacteristically soft, you've already changed the world. You've proven that the impossible can be done. But the question I want to ask you now is, what's next for you? Jaden, sitting across from Musk, considered the question. The months of work had been grueling, but they had been worth it. The feeling of standing at the threshold of a new era, of knowing that what he had created could shape the future, was unlike anything he had ever experienced. And yet, a part of him felt a little lost. He had achieved what many would consider the pinnacle of success, but there was a sense of emptiness that lingered. "I don't know," Jaden admitted, his gaze downcast. "I thought I'd feel different. I thought once I solved the propulsion problem, I'd have all the answers. But now I'm starting to realize that maybe the real journey isn't about solving problems. It's about what we do next." Musk nodded, understanding more than Jaden knew. "You're right. The real challenge comes after the breakthroughs. We've made the impossible possible, but now it's about making it sustainable. About ensuring that what we've built isn't just a one-time success but a foundation for the future." Jaden thought about that. Space travel had always been something abstract, something distant. But now, the reality was within reach. It wasn't just about getting to Mars. It was about building a future there, a thriving colony. He felt the weight of the responsibility, but he also felt a sense of pride. "You know," Musk continued, his voice thoughtful, "I didn't have anyone to guide me when I started SpaceX. I didn't have someone to push me forward when I was lost. But now I see you, someone who's already ahead of where I was at your age, and I can't help but wonder what you'll do next, how you'll push the boundaries further." Jaden was quiet for a moment. Musk's words felt like a challenge, but they were also a comfort. "I guess I never thought about it like that. I've always been focused on the next thing, the next challenge. But now, I think, maybe it's time to start thinking bigger. Not just about space, but about how we can make the world here on Earth better, too." Musk smiled. "That's the spirit. You've already shown that you can change the course of history. Now, it's about how you use that power for something greater. Not just Mars, but the world. There's so much potential, Jaden. So much that hasn't even been touched yet." Jaden's eyes brightened. He had always been driven by a deep sense of curiosity, but now he realized that his true purpose was to be part of something even more profound than he had imagined. It wasn't just about the technology or the science. It was about the impact he could have on people's lives. About leaving a legacy that would inspire others to reach for the stars, not just in space, but in everything they did. "Maybe that's what I've been looking for," Jaden said finally. "Not just a way to reach Mars, but a way to make the world better. To solve the big problems. The ones we've ignored for too long." Musk leaned back in his chair, his eyes reflecting the depth of Jaden's words. "You've got the ability to do both. And now, the world is watching. The future is in your hands, Jaden. Whatever you decide to do with it, I know you'll make a difference." Jaden smiled, feeling a sense of clarity he hadn't had before. He had started this journey with a singular goal: to solve a technical problem, to make space travel possible. But now, the vision had expanded. The possibilities were endless. He wasn't just a boy with a dream anymore. He was someone who could change the world in ways that no one could predict. In the weeks that followed, Jaden continued to work on refining the propulsion system, but he also began to explore other possibilities. He met with other young innovators, thinkers, and dreamers, sharing his knowledge and vision. He became a beacon of hope for the next generation of inventors, someone who showed them that age was no barrier to achievement. As Jaden stood before a crowd at a global summit on space exploration, he realized how far he had come. The world was waiting for the next big idea, the next great leap forward. And now, he was ready to lead them there. "We've taken the first step to reaching Mars," Jaden said, his voice strong and steady as he addressed the audience. "But this isn't just about space. It's about humanity's future. It's about making the impossible possible for all of us. Together, we can build a future beyond our wildest dreams." The crowd erupted in applause, but Jaden didn't hear it. He was already thinking about the next step, the next frontier. The road ahead was long, but for the first time, Jaden knew exactly where he was headed. And this time, it wasn't just about rockets and engines. It was about creating a better world for everyone, on Earth and beyond. The world had changed. SpaceX had just announced the next phase of their Mars mission, plans to send the first crewed mission to the Red Planet within the next 5 years. And at the center of this revolution was a young genius, Jaden. He was no longer just the boy who had built a propulsion system. He had become a symbol of possibility, a beacon of hope for anyone who dared to dream beyond the stars. But despite all the accolades, despite the media frenzy, Jaden felt an unfamiliar stillness within. The excitement of the launch had settled, and now, as the world looked to him for the next big idea, he was faced with a question that no one else could answer for him. What happens next? The weight of the future pressed on him, heavier than the technical challenges he had faced. He had proven the impossible was possible. He had changed the game. But now, the world wanted more. Musk had given him the platform, the mentorship, and the tools to succeed. But Jaden had to choose his own path. It was late one evening when Jaden stood in front of the glass window in his office at SpaceX's headquarters. The city of Hawthorne spread out before him, but his mind wasn't on the buildings or the lights. It was on the road ahead, on the bigger picture. He knew that his work on propulsion technology was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Are you ready for what comes next? Musk's voice cut through the silence behind him. Jaden turned to face him. The older man stood there, looking more like a father than a business partner. There was a new respect between them, something deeper than just the mentor-mentee relationship they had started with. Musk had seen Jaden's potential long before anyone else, and now, it seemed, they both knew the future was uncertain, but together, they could face whatever came next. I think I am, Jaden replied, his voice calm but firm. But I don't think it's just about me anymore. It's about all of us. About inspiring the next generation to do more, think bigger, and reach further than anyone ever thought possible. Musk smiled, a look of quiet approval on his face. Exactly. That's what this is about. It's about creating the future. And it's not just for the people who are alive today. It's for the ones who will come after us. The ones who will look back and say that we didn't just dream big. We made those dreams real. The two stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared vision settling in the air between them. Jaden had grown up with the idea that his work would change the world. He had always known he wanted to make an impact, to do something that would leave a lasting legacy. But now, after everything he had been through, he understood that this journey was never just about him. It was about all the people who had supported him, who had believed in his potential when the world hadn't. It was about every child who saw the rockets launch, who saw Jaden's name on the news and thought, I could do that too. We're building something bigger than rockets, Musk, Jaden said, his voice taking on a new level of conviction. We're building a future for humanity, a future where anything is possible. Musk nodded, his eyes gleaming with pride. Exactly. And you, Jaden, are the one leading the way. The next great mind of this generation. Jaden felt a swell of emotion as he thought about all the people who had helped him along the way. His parents, his teachers, the SpaceX team, and even the countless strangers who believed in his vision from the very beginning. They had all played a part in making this moment possible. And it was because of them that he was here now, standing on the edge of the future. The room was silent for a moment before Musk spoke again, his voice both encouraging and challenging. So, what will you do next? Jaden looked out the window, at the stars flickering above the city lights, and then turned back to Musk, his answer clear. I'll keep pushing. For all of us. I'll keep innovating, keep imagining, and keep making the impossible possible. Musk smiled, clapping him on the back. That's the spirit. The future is yours, Jaden. And it's going to be a hell of a ride. As Jaden left the office, he felt a sense of clarity he hadn't had before. The road ahead was long, and it wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more failures, and more moments of doubt. But one thing was certain. He wasn't in this alone. He had the support of a world that believed in him, and he had a vision for a future that was more than just space travel. It was a vision for a better tomorrow, one where humanity could reach beyond the stars and build something extraordinary. He stepped outside, his gaze lifting to the night sky. It was a reminder of the vastness of the universe and how much still needed to be done. But in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. The dream of Mars was just one chapter in a much larger story, and Jaden, along with the world, would keep writing it. As Jaden gazed up at the stars, his thoughts drifted to the future, not just the scientific breakthroughs or the advancements in technology, but the people who would make them happen. He had come a long way from that small boy with a dream. Now, he was the one inspiring others to dream even bigger. The journey had been full of doubts, but through every setback, every obstacle, Jaden had discovered something powerful, that the pursuit of something greater than oneself was what made life worth living. And in the end, it wasn't just about the rockets, the propulsion systems, or even Mars. It was about what humanity could achieve when they dared to reach for the stars together. What would you do if you had the chance to change the world, to shape the future in ways no one ever thought possible? Jaden had shown the world that anything was possible, and now it was up to the next generation to take that message forward. As the world marveled at Jaden's accomplishments, something far more significant began to stir beneath the surface. Jaden's success was not just a testament to his brilliance. It was a spark that ignited a global movement. The younger generation, inspired by his achievements, began to believe that they, too, could shape the future. His story became a beacon, not only for aspiring scientists and engineers, but for anyone who dared to dream. The press coverage never ceased. Every time Jaden spoke at a conference or appeared in an interview, his words resonated with millions. Yet, amidst the accolades and awards, he remained grounded, focused on the work that still lay ahead. For Jaden, success had never been about the fame or the recognition. It had always been about the impact he could make. One afternoon, Jaden was invited to speak at a prestigious event, an international conference on innovation. The room was filled with leaders from every corner of the tech world, from Silicon Valley giants to representatives of global organizations. The theme of the event was Shaping the Future Together, and Jaden was the keynote speaker. The auditorium was buzzing with anticipation. As Jaden took the stage, the crowd fell silent, eager to hear from the young prodigy who had single-handedly revolutionized space travel. He had already changed the course of history, but the question on everyone's mind was, what would he do next? Jaden stood at the podium, looking out at the audience. His heart raced, not from nerves, but from the weight of what he was about to say. This wasn't just about technology anymore. This was about the responsibility he had to the future. Good afternoon, everyone, Jaden began, his voice steady and confident. We've come a long way in a short time, but we are still just scratching the surface of what's possible. The world is changing at an unprecedented rate. The challenges we face, climate change, inequality, global health, are more complex than ever before. And it's not enough to just focus on one thing, to fix just one problem. We need a holistic approach. We need innovation in every corner of society. He paused, letting his words sink in. The audience was hanging on every syllable, captivated by his vision. We're at a turning point, Jaden continued. Space exploration is incredible, but it's only one part of the puzzle. What we need now is a generation of innovators who will tackle the problems we face here on Earth. People who will use technology to make life better for everyone, not just for a select few. People who will fight for a future where every child, no matter where they're born, has access to the tools and opportunities they need to thrive. Jaden's words were a call to action, a challenge to the audience to think beyond their own fields of expertise, to look at the bigger picture and recognize that innovation was a tool that could shape the world in unimaginable ways. As he finished his speech, the applause was deafening. But for Jaden, the most important part of the event was the conversations that took place afterward. He had ignited something within the audience, a spark that would continue to grow, leading to new ideas, collaborations, and innovations that would change the world. The months following the conference were a whirlwind of activity. Jaden's influence was now global. He was invited to collaborate with government agencies, international organizations, and nonprofit groups. His message had struck a chord with people across the world. It wasn't just about getting to Mars anymore. It was about making the world a better place for everyone. One of the first initiatives he took on was working with a global coalition to address the clean energy crisis. Jaden knew that sustainable energy solutions were essential for the future of humanity, and he wanted to help lead the charge. He began consulting with top energy experts, working on innovative ideas that would not only help the planet, but also create new industries and job opportunities. Meanwhile, back at SpaceX, Jaden continued to work alongside Musk and the team to refine the Mars mission. They were preparing for the first crewed mission to Mars, but the focus was shifting. It wasn't just about getting humans to Mars. It was about how to create a sustainable colony. The challenges were immense, but Jaden was ready. He knew that his work could have a profound impact on humanity's future, and that was enough to keep him motivated. Despite all the attention, Jaden never lost sight of what truly mattered: the people who believed in him and the cause he had taken up. As he worked late into the night, poring over data, testing new designs, and speaking with leaders from around the world, he was reminded of the young girl from his childhood who had first inspired him to pursue his dreams. He had wanted to prove to her, and to everyone else, that anything was possible. Now, he was proving it every day. But as his influence grew, so did the pressure. Jaden had been thrust into the spotlight, and with that came scrutiny. There were those who questioned whether someone so young could truly handle the magnitude of the responsibilities he had taken on. There were critics who argued that his focus on space exploration was a distraction from more immediate problems on Earth. But Jaden didn't mind the criticism. He understood that progress was never without opposition. The important thing was to stay true to the mission. In private moments, Jaden would sometimes feel overwhelmed. The weight of the future pressed heavily on his shoulders, but he found solace in the simple things: a conversation with his family, a quiet walk in the park, or the satisfaction of solving a tough problem. It was in those moments that he remembered why he had started this journey: to make a difference, to change the world. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Jaden sat in his office, reflecting on everything that had happened. His desk was cluttered with papers, blueprints, and notes. He thought about the people he had met, the innovations he had been part of, and the dreams he had yet to fulfill. And then, his phone buzzed with a message from Musk. "The world is watching. Don't forget that it's not just about what you create, but how you inspire others to create." Jaden smiled. He had come so far, and yet there was still so much more to do. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Months passed, and Jaden's influence only continued to grow. The conversations about innovation, the future, and sustainability that he had sparked were now a global movement. Young people, scientists, and entrepreneurs from all corners of the world were stepping forward with new ideas, eager to contribute to the future Jaden had envisioned. The world was waking up to the potential that lay within each of them, and it was because of the example he had set. Jaden had become the face of this new era, but he knew that his success wasn't about him anymore. It was about the ideas that were now being born from the seeds he had planted. As the months rolled on, he found himself working with people from all walks of life: engineers developing new solar technologies, activists fighting for environmental justice, and even artists using their creativity to spread messages of hope and unity. It wasn't just about the tech anymore. It was about a complete transformation of how humanity approached the future. One particular evening, Jaden attended a special event in New York, an innovation summit designed to showcase the brightest minds across the globe. The gathering was filled with scientists, world leaders, and influencers, all eager to hear from the young man who had redefined the limits of possibility. Jaden had been invited to give a talk on the role of technology in shaping global sustainability. As he walked into the auditorium, he could feel the weight of the world's eyes on him. But this time, it felt different. He was no longer just a speaker. He was part of a movement. He was helping lead the way for a new generation. As he took the stage, the applause was deafening. But Jaden didn't care about the applause. He wasn't here to bask in the spotlight. He was here to continue the work of transforming the future. "Good evening," he began, his voice calm and steady. "A year ago, I stood before a crowd just like this, talking about space exploration. Today, I'm here to talk about something even more important: how we can use the innovations we've created to solve the problems we face here on Earth." He paused, making eye contact with different members of the audience. He could feel their anticipation building. The crowd was used to hearing grand speeches, but they had come to expect something different from him, something more. "We've seen how technology can push the boundaries of what we thought was possible. But now, it's time to use that same power to heal our planet, to fight climate change, to eradicate poverty, and to create a future where no one is left behind." The room was silent. Jaden had their full attention. "We have the tools," he continued. "We have the knowledge. And most importantly, we have the will. The question is, are we ready to use everything we've learned to build a future that works for everyone?" He could feel the energy in the room shift. This wasn't just a talk about progress. This was a call to action. Jaden wasn't just inspiring people anymore. He was challenging them to do something about it. Over the next few days, Jaden participated in panel discussions, met with thought leaders, and held closed-door meetings with governments and organizations. Everywhere he went, he spoke the same message: the time for change is now. In one such meeting, he met with a group of world leaders to discuss global climate change solutions. As the conversation unfolded, Jaden listened intently. While there was a shared understanding of the problems, the solutions seemed far more fragmented. He knew that the world needed a unified, global effort, and it needed it fast. "I've been working on a new proposal," Jaden said, after a particularly long discussion. "What if we could create an international alliance, much like the one we've seen in space exploration, but focused on sustainability? A global partnership that works together to create the infrastructure, technology, and resources needed to combat climate change on a large scale." The room grew quiet as everyone processed the idea. "I'm talking about shared resources, shared knowledge, and shared responsibility. We need to bring together every country, every company, and every individual who has the tools and expertise to make a difference. This can't be something left to just a few nations or corporations. It has to be a collective effort, because the planet belongs to all of us." The leaders in the room exchanged glances. It was a bold proposal, but Jaden's words had hit the mark. This was the kind of thinking the world needed. As the Global Sustainability Alliance began to take shape, Jaden found himself at the forefront of a new initiative, one that would not only change the way humanity approached technology, but would also fundamentally alter the way nations collaborated. He was working tirelessly, connecting with governments, industry leaders, and grassroots organizations. But even amidst the chaos of world-changing work, Jaden had one priority: the next generation of innovators. He spent more and more time in schools, universities, and communities, speaking to young people about their potential. He often found himself talking not about the technology of tomorrow, but about the power of their ideas today. "Every one of you," he told a group of middle school students in Brooklyn, "has the potential to change the world. Maybe you won't be the next Jaden, or the next Elon Musk, or the next whoever you think you should be, but you will be the first you, and that's where real innovation begins." He wanted to ignite something in these kids, to make them see the world not as a place of limits, but as a place of endless possibility. And to do that, he needed to show them that the power to create, to solve problems, and to make a difference was already within them. One day, after a particularly inspiring talk at a local high school, a young girl came up to Jaden, her eyes wide with excitement. "Mr. Jaden," she said, "I'm going to build a machine that can clean the oceans. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to do it." Jaden smiled at her, his heart swelling with pride. "That's the spirit. And remember, if you can imagine it, you can make it happen. Just keep going." As the world continued to evolve, Jaden felt a deep sense of satisfaction. It wasn't the global accolades that fulfilled him, nor was it the recognition he had earned. It was the realization that he had helped create a ripple effect, a chain reaction of ideas, innovations, and actions that would continue long after he was gone. But the most important lesson Jaden had learned was this: the future was never truly written. It was something that each generation could shape in their own image. And as long as people were willing to dream, to work together, and to push the boundaries of what was possible, the future would always belong to the brave, the curious, and the bold. As the months passed, the Global Sustainability Initiative began to take shape, and Jaden's influence continued to grow. Yet, with the rapid expansion of his initiatives came mounting pressure. The eyes of the world were on him, and the expectations were high. Everywhere he went, people were asking for more. More ideas, more solutions, more action. His schedule was packed, and the weight of the world seemed to hang on his shoulders. Despite his deep commitment to his work, Jaden often found himself wondering if he was doing enough. He could see the world's problems laid out before him: climate change, inequality, access to education, and so much more. But no matter how hard he worked, it seemed like there was always another challenge, another crisis that needed his attention. At SpaceX, the pressure was no different. With the Mars mission approaching, the team was working around the clock to finalize the preparations for the first human mission to the Red Planet. While the mission was historic in its own right, Jaden felt the weight of knowing that the eyes of humanity would be on them as they made their first leap into space. Success was essential, not just for the space community, but for the future of humanity. A failed mission would be disastrous, and Jaden felt personally responsible for making sure that everything went perfectly. One night, after a long day of meetings, Jaden sat in his office at SpaceX, staring at the screen of his computer. The numbers, charts, and technical specifications seemed to blur together as his mind raced. He rubbed his temples, trying to ease the headache that had been building all day. The pressure was becoming unbearable. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Elon Musk. "Jaden, we need to talk?" Jaden stared at the message for a moment, then typed a quick reply, "I'm on my way." A few minutes later, he was in Musk's office. Musk was sitting at his desk, his usual calm demeanor masking the seriousness of the situation. "You've been working non-stop," Musk said, looking up from a set of documents. "How are you holding up?" Jaden shrugged, trying to mask the exhaustion that had been creeping up on him. "I'm fine. Just a lot to think about, you know? There's a lot riding on this mission." Musk nodded, his expression softening. "I get it, but you need to take care of yourself, too. We can't afford to burn out." Jaden sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just don't know if I can keep up with all of this. The sustainability initiative, the Mars mission, the pressure from everyone to come up with solutions. It feels like I'm drowning in it." Musk leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "The pressure is real, but you're not in this alone. We're a team. You've got us, and you've got people who believe in you. I believe in you." Jaden looked at Musk, his mentor and friend, feeling a sense of relief. Musk had always been a steady presence in his life, someone who knew exactly what to say when Jaden needed reassurance. "I appreciate that," Jaden said quietly. "I guess I'm just scared. Scared that if I don't come through all of this, everything we're working for won't matter." Musk leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "Jaden, the world doesn't expect you to do everything on your own, but they do expect you to lead, to inspire. And you've been doing that better than anyone. It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. And you're making a lot of progress." Jaden nodded, feeling the weight in his chest lift slightly. "I'll try to keep that in mind." Musk smiled. "Good. Now, let's get some sleep. We've got a long road ahead, and we need you at your best." The next few days were a blur of activity. Jaden threw himself back into his work, taking Musk's words to heart. He focused on the tasks at hand, delegating responsibilities when necessary and leaning on his team for support. Slowly, the overwhelming sense of pressure began to ease. He realized that, like any great mission, it was about the journey, not just the destination. One afternoon, while on a break between meetings, Jaden took a walk outside SpaceX's headquarters. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the campus. He found a quiet spot by a small pond and sat down on a bench, breathing deeply. As he gazed out at the horizon, he thought about everything he had accomplished so far. The Mars mission, the sustainability initiative, the way his words had sparked a global movement. But most importantly, he thought about the young girl from Brooklyn who had come up to him after his talk. He thought about her words and how they had reminded him of why he had started this journey in the first place. Jaden knew that he could not carry the weight of the world alone, but he could continue to lead, to inspire, and to work alongside the people who shared his vision for the future. Together, they could change the world. Together, they could solve the problems that seemed insurmountable. He smiled to himself, feeling the burden lift. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about doing the best he could and trusting that his efforts, no matter how small they seemed, would have a lasting impact. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jaden stood up, ready to face the next challenge. The road ahead was long, but he was no longer afraid of the journey. He knew that with every step, he was one step closer to the future he had always dreamed of. As Jaden's influence spread and his initiatives continued to gather momentum, the world's eyes were increasingly fixed on him. His work in sustainability was being hailed as revolutionary, and the Mars mission was drawing attention from across the globe. People were hopeful, inspired by the possibility of a new future, one where technology worked for the betterment of all, where the planet could be saved, and where human civilization would reach for the stars. But with every revolution, there were those who feared change, those who saw their own power slipping away. And as Jaden's projects grew in scale, so did the resistance. Some of it was quiet, lurking in the background, while other forces were more open in their opposition. Behind the smiles and handshakes, there were powerful individuals and organizations that stood to lose from the shifts Jaden was spearheading. One evening, as Jaden was walking through the SpaceX campus, reflecting on the work ahead, his phone buzzed. It was a text from his trusted advisor, Sarah. "We need to talk. Urgent." The message sent a chill down his spine. He hadn't heard from Sarah for a few days, and the tone of the text made it clear that something wasn't right. He immediately replied, asking to meet. Minutes later, they were sitting in a private conference room at SpaceX. Sarah's face was serious, her eyes narrowed as she looked at him. "What's going on?" Jaden asked, feeling a sense of unease creeping up his spine. "It's the Sustainability Initiative," Sarah began. "We've been getting some unusual pushback, high-level pushback." Jaden raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? I thought we were making great progress." "The Global Alliance is starting to form. People are on board." Sarah nodded, but her expression remained grim. "That's just it. There are groups within major industries, oil, tech, pharmaceuticals, that are worried about the impact of your initiative. They're not just worried about losing profits, they're worried about losing influence." Jaden's mind raced. He'd always known there would be resistance, but the scale of it surprised him. "Who exactly are we talking about?" Sarah sighed, leaning forward. "I can't say for sure, but we've noticed a pattern. There's a significant amount of money being funneled into campaigns that discredit your work. We've also seen attempts to infiltrate the networks you're working with, trying to derail the movement from the inside." Jaden leaned back in his chair, his heart heavy. This was the kind of challenge he hadn't anticipated. An invisible enemy, operating in the shadows. "I knew it wouldn't be easy," he muttered. "But this is worse than I thought." Sarah nodded. "We've managed to track some of the funding back to powerful figures who have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. They're using everything at their disposal: disinformation, media manipulation, even legal pressure." Jaden's fist clenched. He had faced challenges before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about ideas or innovations. This was about power and control, and it was going to take more than just good intentions to overcome it. "We need to expose them," Jaden said, his voice resolute. "We need to go public with this. We can't let them undermine everything we've worked for." Sarah shook her head. "Going public might make things worse. It could escalate the situation and put even more pressure on you. They want to silence you, Jaden. If they can make you seem like the problem, if they can turn public opinion against you, they'll win." Jaden's mind whirred. He knew she was right. If he made this fight public too soon, it could backfire, and the entire movement could be derailed. But the thought of sitting idly by while powerful forces tried to dismantle everything he had built made him sick to his stomach. "I'm not backing down," he said firmly. "This is bigger than me, Sarah. This is bigger than all of us." Sarah's gaze softened. "I know, and that's why we have to be careful. We need to outmaneuver them, not let them dictate the terms of this fight." The next few weeks were a blur of strategy and covert action. Jaden and his team worked tirelessly to gather information, track the sources of disinformation, and shore up their networks. But despite their efforts, the opposition grew bolder. There were whispers in the media, rumors about Jaden's character, and suggestions that he was more interested in fame than in actual progress. His every move was scrutinized, his every word twisted. The campaign to discredit him was well-funded and relentless. But Jaden wasn't one to back down from a fight. He had always known that change wouldn't come easily, and he had learned from his experiences with SpaceX and his sustainability work that the biggest challenges often yielded the most significant rewards. If these powerful figures thought they could intimidate him into submission, they were wrong. He kept his focus on the mission, on the people who were depending on him to lead the way. But he also knew that he needed to take action, and he needed to do it carefully. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the future of the world. One night, as Jaden sat at his desk, looking over a set of documents about the Mars mission, he received an unexpected phone call. It was Elon Musk. "Jaden, I think it's time we take the fight to them," Musk said, his voice unusually serious. Jaden's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? We have to expose the corruption that's trying to stop this, Musk continued. The world needs to see who's behind all of this. Jaden took a deep breath, weighing his options. It was dangerous, but Musk was right. The truth had to come to light. If they were going to win this battle, they had to expose the forces working against them and show the world what was at stake. I'm in, Jaden said, his voice determined. Let's do it. The days that followed were a whirlwind of action. Jaden and Musk's teams worked together to compile evidence, reach out to trusted allies in the media, and prepare for a public release of information. They knew they had to be careful. One wrong move, and the campaign against them could turn the tables. But they were ready. And when the truth finally came out, it was nothing short of explosive. The morning after their decision to expose the forces working against them, Jaden found himself pacing in his office, the weight of what was about to unfold heavy on his mind. Elon had been right. This fight wasn't just about the future of his initiatives. It was about the future of humanity. If they didn't act now, the momentum they had worked so hard to build could be lost forever. The plan was simple, yet dangerous. Jaden, Elon, and their teams would release a comprehensive report detailing the covert campaign of disinformation and the vested interests working to stop their progress. They would leverage trusted journalists and media outlets to tell their side of the story, making sure that the public knew exactly who was behind the efforts to discredit Jaden's work. But it was a double-edged sword. If they weren't careful, the backlash could be catastrophic. At 10 a.m. sharp, Jaden and Elon sat in front of a camera, prepared to release a joint statement. The room was calm, but Jaden could feel the tension in the air. He had never imagined that his role in changing the world would come with such personal stakes, but here he was. The eyes of the world were on him, and the battle for the future was about to begin. As the cameras started rolling, Elon took the lead, his calm voice steady. We've all been working toward a better future, one where sustainability, space exploration, and equality are at the forefront. But not everyone wants that future. There are powerful individuals who benefit from the status quo, and they will stop at nothing to protect their interests, Elon began. Today, we reveal the truth. The efforts to stop our work are not just isolated incidents. They are part of a coordinated campaign by those who profit from the destruction of our planet and the stagnation of human progress. Jaden nodded, his heart pounding. This was the moment. The truth had to come out. He continued, his voice steady but filled with conviction. We've uncovered a network of corporations and influential figures who have been funding misinformation campaigns and trying to sabotage our work behind the scenes. They've used every tool at their disposal: disinformation, legal threats, and even political pressure. But we won't be silenced. This isn't just our fight. It's a fight for the future of humanity. The statement was clear, powerful, and undeniable. The report they had compiled, with evidence of the disinformation efforts and the individuals involved, was released to the press shortly after. The media coverage was immediate and explosive. News outlets from around the world picked up the story, and social media buzzed with reactions. Some praised Jaden and Elon for their transparency, while others were skeptical, accusing them of playing the victim. But the truth was out there, and there was no going back. For days, Jaden and his team worked tirelessly to manage the fallout. The campaign against them didn't stop. It grew more intense, with new smear tactics, new narratives designed to paint Jaden as an opportunist or a fraud. But they were ready. They fought back with facts, with transparency, and with the unwavering belief that their work was worth it. As the media storm raged, Jaden found solace in the messages of support pouring in from people around the world. From young activists to concerned citizens, from environmental groups to tech entrepreneurs, people were rallying behind the movement. They were standing with him, and that gave him the strength to keep going. But it wasn't just the public support that kept him going. It was the work itself. Despite the chaos, Jaden remained focused on the task at hand. The sustainability initiative was gaining traction in more countries, and the Mars mission was progressing steadily. The future, though uncertain, was still within reach. The obstacles were real, but Jaden knew that they could be overcome. A week after the report was released, Jaden sat down with Elon again, this time in a quiet room at SpaceX's headquarters. The media frenzy had calmed slightly, but the tension remained. They knew the real battle was only just beginning. Elon, Jaden began, his voice thoughtful. I didn't expect this level of pushback. I mean, I knew there would be challenges, but this is next level. These people, they'll do anything to maintain their grip on power. Elon nodded. Powerful people don't give up their influence easily. But they've underestimated you. They've underestimated us. Jaden sighed, looking out the window. I keep thinking, what if we're wrong? What if we're not doing enough? What if we can't change things the way we want to? Elon placed a hand on his shoulder. Doubt is a part of the process. But if you're asking whether we've made a difference, the answer is yes. You've already changed the conversation. You've already made people rethink what's possible. And that's what matters. Jaden absorbed Elon's words, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. It wasn't just about winning the battle. It was about keeping the momentum alive, about inspiring others to join the cause. He knew now that he couldn't do it alone. But together, with a united vision, they could change the world. A few days later, Jaden was giving a public talk at a major tech conference in San Francisco. The crowd was large, thousands of people, from innovators to journalists to everyday citizens who were all there to hear him speak. His message had never been more important, and despite the pressure, he was determined to stay focused. As he stepped up to the stage, the room fell silent. He took a deep breath and began speaking, his voice calm but filled with passion. We're facing a crisis, one that requires all of us to act, Jaden began. The problems we face are not insurmountable, but they won't be solved by one person or one company. They require a collective effort, a global effort. And that's what we're building, an alliance of like-minded individuals and organizations who believe in a better future. He paused, looking out at the audience. Yes, we've encountered opposition, but opposition is a sign that we're on the right track. The truth is on our side. And together, we can create a future that is not only sustainable, but one that propels humanity forward. The audience erupted in applause, and Jaden felt a surge of energy. The fight was far from over, but this was the beginning of something much bigger. As the dust from the media storm began to settle, Jaden felt the weight of the battle he had started to wage. The global attention had caused ripples, some for the better, others for the worse. He knew they were gaining ground, but the opposition was relentless. They were playing a long game, using their power to try and discredit him, to undermine his every move. But Jaden had something they didn't: resilience and the unwavering support of a global movement. However, as much as the public support was encouraging, it wasn't enough. They needed more than just public outrage and media coverage. They needed allies who could match the power and resources of their enemies. Jaden knew that, to truly make a difference, he would have to build a coalition of unexpected allies. But in this dangerous game, trust was a luxury, and every move had to be calculated. It was late in the evening when Jaden received an encrypted message from an unknown source. He had become accustomed to anonymous communications, especially after the recent pushback, but this one was different. The message was brief. We know who they are, and we can help. Meet us tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the old observatory. No one must know. Jaden's heart raced as he read the words. This could be the break they needed, the kind of ally who could turn the tide in their favor. He immediately forwarded the message to Sarah and Elon, and within moments, they were discussing the potential risks. Despite the uncertainty, they both agreed. This was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. The next morning, Jaden and Sarah, with only a handful of trusted bodyguards, made their way to the old observatory on the outskirts of Palo Alto. The building was abandoned, a relic of another time, quiet and forgotten. It seemed like an odd choice for a meeting place, but the secrecy of it only added to the intrigue. They arrived early, their breaths visible in the crisp morning air, and waited. At exactly 10 a.m., a black SUV pulled up. The door opened, and out stepped a man dressed in a tailored suit, his expression unreadable. He was tall, with a sharp jawline and dark hair, a man who appeared to belong to the world of high finance or corporate power. But there was something else about him, something that suggested he wasn't an ordinary player in this game. Jaden and Sarah approached cautiously, but the man didn't seem surprised to see them. Without a word, he gestured for them to follow him inside the observatory. I trust you got my message, the man said once they were all inside. His voice was calm, calculated, but there was an edge to it. I've been watching your progress, and I believe we share a common enemy. Jaden didn't waste time with pleasantries. Who are you? And why should we trust you? The man paused before answering. My name is Nathan Cole. I work within the global financial sector. You might say I have a vested interest in seeing the old order crumble. But more importantly, I have information. Information that could expose the individuals behind the campaign to derail your work. Sarah looked skeptical. And what do you want in return? Nathan's gaze hardened. Nothing, at least not for now. I'm not doing this for profit. I'm doing this because I believe in the work you're doing. And I've seen firsthand how far the powers against you are willing to go to keep the status quo intact. Jaden studied Nathan carefully, trying to assess the sincerity of his words. Trust was a rare commodity in his world, and after everything they had been through, he wasn't sure if he could afford to take risks. But something about Nathan's calm demeanor and the urgency in his words told Jaden that this man was not one to be dismissed easily. What's the catch? Jaden finally asked. Nathan leaned in slightly. I can provide you with access to financial records, internal communications, and even direct connections to key players within these industries. They've been working together in the shadows to manipulate markets and stop progress. But what they don't know is that their efforts have been compromised. Someone from within their ranks has been leaking information. Jaden exchanged a glance with Sarah. This was the break they had been hoping for. Nathan had the information they needed, and it could be the key to not only stopping the sabotage, but also exposing the forces behind it once and for all. How do you want to proceed? Sarah asked, her tone cautious but intrigued. Nathan stood up, a hint of a smile forming on his lips. I'll give you access to a secure channel where you can view all of the data. From there, it's up to you to decide how to use it. But be warned, using this information will make you even more of a target. Once you pull the trigger, there's no turning back. Jaden nodded. He knew the risks. He had been facing them every day since he first set out to change the world. But this was their chance. This could be the edge they needed to shift the tide in their favor. With this information, they could expose the truth to the world, and maybe, just maybe, they could end the war before it escalated even further. Give us the access, Jaden said firmly. We're ready. Nathan didn't hesitate. He handed them a small device, sleek, unmarked, and nondescript, and nodded toward the door. I'll be in touch, he said cryptically. Remember, the clock is ticking. They'll be watching. As Nathan left, Sarah turned to Jaden, her eyes sharp. This could be a trap. Jaden paused, his hand on the device, feeling the weight of the decision settle in. It could be, but I'm done waiting. We take this fight to them. We expose them for what they are. The device Nathan Cole had given Jaden was more than just a piece of technology. It was the key to unlocking everything. As soon as they left the observatory, Jaden and Sarah were already making plans to analyze the data. They found a secluded area within SpaceX's headquarters where they could safely access the information without attracting attention. It was late afternoon when they sat down in front of a secure terminal. Sarah worked quickly, plugging in the device. The screen flickered to life, and Jaden could feel his heart race as the files began to open, revealing reams of documents, encrypted messages, and financial statements. It was an overwhelming amount of information, but every second felt like a step closer to the truth. This is huge, Sarah muttered under her breath, scanning through the files. It's all here. Internal communications, meetings, even blackmail attempts. Jaden leaned over her shoulder, his eyes widening as he saw names of people he recognized. Influential figures from the corporate world, government officials, and financial tycoons. The deeper they dug, the more he realized how far-reaching this conspiracy was. These were not just isolated players. They were the architects of a web of manipulation that spanned the globe. They controlled markets, manipulated public opinion, and had used every trick in the book to suppress innovation and progress. One file in particular caught Jaden's attention. It was a recorded conversation between several high-ranking officials and corporate leaders. The words they spoke were chilling. Jaden's work is a threat, one voice said, his tone sharp. If we don't stop him now, his initiative will change everything. It's not just about the environment, It's about control. If he succeeds, we lose everything. Another voice responded, we've already begun to destabilize his reputation. The media campaign is working, but we need more. We need to hit him where it hurts. His connections, his support. Once we break those ties, he'll be finished. Jaden's breath caught in his chest. This wasn't just about sabotaging a project. It was about crushing the very idea of a future that didn't serve the interests of the few. They weren't just fighting against a company or an idea. They were fighting for control over the future of humanity itself. This is bigger than I thought, Jaden said, his voice low. They're not just trying to stop us. They're trying to eliminate any hope for a future that benefits everyone. Sarah's face was grim. They'll stop at nothing. We need to move quickly. If they're willing to go this far, they won't hesitate to escalate. We're dealing with dangerous people. Jaden nodded, his mind racing. They had to act. The information was too valuable to keep to themselves, but it had to be handled carefully. If they exposed it all at once, they risked triggering a full-blown attack. No, they needed to be strategic. They needed to make sure they had enough leverage to ensure the public would believe them and to protect themselves from the inevitable retaliation. This isn't just about us anymore, Jaden said, his voice hardening. This is about the future. If we don't expose this now, everything we've worked for will be destroyed. Sarah agreed. We'll take it to the public, but we need to be ready for their next move. They'll come after us, harder than ever. As Jaden and Sarah sat in the quiet, dimly lit room, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy that could change the world, they both knew one thing for certain. The fight was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The next day, Jaden met with Elon, determined to share the findings. Elon listened carefully, his face expressionless as Jaden went over the documents. Once Jaden finished explaining everything, Elon leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. This is dangerous, Elon said finally, his voice steady but with a hint of concern. If we release this information, we'll have a target on our backs. But you're right, it's too big to keep quiet about. The world needs to know what's really going on. Jaden nodded. I can't keep watching this happen. These people are trying to manipulate the future for their own gain. I won't let them. Elon gave him a long, assessing look. You're doing the right thing, but you have to be prepared for what comes next. Once you expose this, there's no going back. They won't just go away. I know, Jaden replied, his voice unwavering, but we can't keep living in fear. Not when the stakes are this high. Later that week, they began to take action. Using trusted sources, they began to strategically leak key pieces of information to the press, starting with the damning recorded conversation. They worked with investigative journalists who had a reputation for breaking big stories, ensuring that the narrative was framed carefully. This wasn't just about pointing fingers. It was about showing the world the truth and exposing the hidden hands controlling everything. The media coverage exploded. News outlets from around the world began reporting on the conspiracy, with experts analyzing the implications of the leaked conversations. Public opinion began to shift. People who had once been skeptical of Jaden's initiatives now saw the extent of the corruption working against them. Support grew rapidly, and the movement began to gain even more momentum. But the forces against them were not idle. Almost immediately, there were attempts to discredit Jaden's character again, this time focusing on his personal life. Fake stories and rumors began to spread on social media, aimed at tarnishing his reputation and making him look unstable. It was the same old playbook, but this time, Jaden was ready. He took to social media himself, posting a direct response, acknowledging the attacks, but remaining focused on the mission at hand. They want you to doubt me. They want you to believe that I'm not worthy of your trust, he said in the video. But here's the truth. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for all of us. And together, we can build a future where everyone wins. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people, many of whom had been on the fence, now rallied behind him more strongly than ever. The world was waking up, but Jaden knew it wasn't over. Not yet. There was still too much at stake, and too many powerful people who would stop at nothing to protect their grip on power. The battle was only intensifying. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity, as Jaden's movement gained traction like never before. The leaked information had ignited a firestorm. public outcry reached unprecedented levels, and the pressure on the people behind the conspiracy grew unbearable. The media was relentless, scrutinizing every move of those involved, from corporate tycoons to government officials. The truth had been exposed, but Jaden knew that wasn't enough. He had awakened a beast, and now he had to be prepared for the fight of his life. At the same time, the backlash was relentless. The powerful figures who had once controlled the narrative now realized that they had underestimated Jaden. They weren't just fighting a businessman or a visionary. They were fighting a movement that had the potential to disrupt everything they had spent their lives building. They had underestimated the strength of the people, the public demand for change, and the force of technology in the hands of someone like Jaden. One evening, as Jaden sat in his office overlooking the horizon, Sarah walked in with a somber expression. Her eyes were sharp, the weight of everything weighing heavily on her. "We've got a problem," she said, walking over to his desk and sliding a folder in front of him. "The attacks are escalating." Jaden opened the folder, and his heart sank as he saw the new wave of propaganda. It wasn't just about discrediting him anymore. There were accusations, distorted truths about his connections, his personal life, and even his past. They were trying to break him from the inside out. The media wasn't just trying to tear him down. They were creating a narrative that framed him as dangerous, unstable, and untrustworthy. "The more we expose them," Jaden muttered, rubbing his eyes in frustration, "the harder they fight back." Sarah nodded, her voice steady. "They've started to target your family, your supporters. There are rumors about your intentions. They're making it personal." Jaden stood up, walking over to the window as he processed the gravity of the situation. He had anticipated this, but it was still hard to bear. He had always known the risks of exposing the truth, but now the consequences were becoming real. He wasn't just fighting for his vision anymore. He was fighting for everything he held dear. "You know," Sarah continued, her voice softer now, "they'll stop at nothing. They'll keep attacking until we're too distracted to keep moving forward. They want you to lose focus. We can't let that happen." Jaden took a deep breath, collecting himself. "I know. We have to keep pushing. But we need a plan, something bigger. Something that'll make them realize that this isn't just about me. This is about the future." That night, Jaden stayed up late, going through the files again, seeking any new leads. He couldn't let them dictate the pace of this fight. The world needed a clear vision, and he was the one to provide it. There was no turning back now. The following week, Elon reached out with an idea. He had been in talks with several key figures in the tech world, including innovators and disruptors who were also interested in creating change. Some of them had been quietly supporting Jaden from the shadows, but it was time for them to step forward and publicly align with him. "We need to take this movement global," Elon told Jaden over the phone. "The message is strong, but it's being drowned out by all the noise. If we gather the right people, leaders, entrepreneurs, even celebrities, we can make the noise work in our favor." Jaden thought about it. It was a bold move. If they could unite the tech world, the business world, and even the arts community, they would have an undeniable force. They could not only expose the corruption, but also give the world an alternative vision for the future. "I'm on board," Jaden said, his voice resolute. "But we need to be careful. This has to be authentic. If it's just a publicity stunt, they'll tear us apart." "Trust me," Elon replied. "This won't be a stunt. It'll be the catalyst we need. We'll show the world that there's more at stake here than just a single project. We're talking about the future of humanity." A week later, the announcement came. Jaden and Elon, alongside a coalition of influential figures from across the globe, revealed the launch of the Future Forward initiative. The goal was simple yet powerful: to create a sustainable, inclusive future by empowering innovation, entrepreneurship, and collaboration while dismantling the monopolies that had held humanity back. The coalition was a who's who of innovators and disruptors: tech moguls, environmental activists, financial leaders, and even cultural icons. There was one message that resonated through all of them. Change was inevitable, and it had to come from the ground up. It wasn't just about creating wealth. It was about creating opportunities, leveling the playing field, and ensuring that every individual had a voice in shaping the future. The announcement sent shockwaves through the media. This wasn't just a battle between Jaden and the elites anymore. This was a movement that had spread like wildfire, and it had the power to reshape the future. The media immediately reacted. The old guard fought back, calling it a reckless attempt to disrupt the natural order. They painted Jaden and his supporters as radicals, as individuals who were out of touch with reality. The propaganda machine kicked into high gear, and once again, Jaden found himself under attack. But this time, the response was different. Jaden wasn't alone anymore. People all over the world, ordinary citizens, entrepreneurs, activists, rallied around the movement. Social media exploded with hashtags, petitions, and rallies. A global conversation had begun, and no amount of negative press could stop it. The momentum was building, and there was no turning back. As Jaden stood before the crowd at the first official Future Forward Summit, his heart pounded in his chest. He knew that this moment would define everything. He could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he wasn't afraid. This was his purpose. This was his time. Together, Jaden said into the microphone, his voice clear and unwavering, "We will build a future where innovation, equity, and sustainability are not just dreams but realities." This is just the beginning. The crowd erupted in applause. The movement had begun, and it was unstoppable. The Future Forward initiative was no longer just an idea. It had become a global movement. The press coverage was intense, and every news outlet had something to say, some positive, some negative. But one thing was certain, Jaden's name was on the lips of people everywhere. And with that came a new set of challenges. The more successful the initiative became, the more ruthless the opposition grew. It wasn't just about discrediting Jaden anymore. The conspiracy had evolved. Those in power, corporate giants, government officials, and shadowy figures weren't just trying to stop the movement from gaining ground. They were trying to crush it. And in their eyes, Jaden had become the face of a revolution they could not allow to succeed. The attacks were multifaceted. The smear campaigns intensified, with fabricated stories about Jaden's past being circulated. They tried to paint him as a radical, someone who couldn't be trusted with the future of humanity. At the same time, they targeted his supporters. Companies that had pledged their support were pressured into withdrawing, their executives receiving threats, their reputations held hostage by anonymous, but powerful, forces. Jaden was used to the pressure by now, but there were moments when even he felt the weight of it all. It wasn't just about him anymore. This movement represented something much larger than himself. It was about the countless people who had placed their faith in the Future Forward initiative. It was about creating a future where innovation wasn't stifled by the greedy few, a future where everyone had access to opportunities, no matter their background. But as the stakes rose, Jaden knew he couldn't win this battle alone. He needed to go deeper, to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy against him and the world. Late one night, in the midst of a particularly draining week, Sarah called Jaden with urgent news. She had uncovered something unexpected. "I've been digging into their financials. Some of the same people who were involved in the early stages of the campaign to discredit you," she said, her voice low but filled with determination. "They're running a shadow operation. It's bigger than we thought." Jaden's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, a shadow operation?" Sarah paused, the sound of typing in the background. "They've been laundering money through various shell companies. And get this, they've been funneling it into groups that are now working against us. They've even infiltrated some of our key supporters, working behind the scenes to sabotage everything." Jaden's mind raced. "How do we stop them?" "We expose them," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "But we need to be careful. If we move too quickly, we risk tipping them off. We need the right kind of leverage." Jaden's fingers drummed against the desk as he thought through their options. The information Sarah had found was explosive, and it was clear that this was the final piece of the puzzle. But it was also dangerous. Exposing this operation would be a risk, not just to his life, but to the lives of everyone who had supported the initiative. "We'll need help," Jaden said finally. "We'll need to bring in more trusted allies. We can't do this alone." Sarah agreed. "I'll reach out to some of the key figures from the coalition. We'll need to act quickly, but we can't afford to make a mistake." The next few days were a blur of strategizing, planning, and gathering allies. Jaden and Sarah worked in overdrive, coordinating with their trusted contacts. The plan was risky, too risky for some, but for Jaden, there was no turning back now. If they wanted to bring down the shadow operation, they had to move decisively. "We have one shot at this," Jaden said during one of their late-night meetings. "We can't afford to hesitate." With the coalition behind them, they began to put their plan into action. Sarah and a small team of analysts began the delicate task of collecting irrefutable evidence. Meanwhile, Jaden worked to strengthen their public support, making sure the world knew that their cause was just. Every tweet, every interview, every speech was an opportunity to rally more people to the cause. And then, the first domino fell. It started with a report. A major news outlet published an expose detailing the financial connections between the shadow operation and several top executives, people who had publicly opposed Jaden's initiative but had privately been profiting off the chaos it created. The article was shocking. Names were named. Evidence was provided. And the public reaction was immediate. Within hours, social media exploded. The expose went viral. Journalists from all over the world began to investigate further, uncovering even more corruption, more connections between the elites and the covert groups working to undermine Jaden's work. The truth was spreading like wildfire, and there was nothing the opposition could do to stop it. But this victory came at a cost. As the investigation continued, Jaden received a phone call that would change everything. It was from Elon. "They found us, Jaden," Elon said, his voice grave. "They know what we're planning. We've been compromised." Jaden's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, compromised?" "They've infiltrated our systems. They've been tracking every move, listening to every conversation. It's only a matter of time before they come after us directly. You and Sarah are in danger." Jaden felt the weight of the words sink in. "What do we do?" "You need to disappear. For a while, at least. Lay low. We'll continue the fight, but you can't be the target anymore. Not if you want this movement to survive." Jaden's mind raced, but he knew Elon was right. The stakes had escalated beyond anything he had imagined. They weren't just up against a corrupt system. They were up against people who would kill to protect their power. "Understood," Jaden said, his voice tight. "I'll keep you updated." Jaden and Sarah knew it was time to leave. They couldn't stay in the public eye any longer. The risk of assassination, or worse, was too great. They went into hiding, taking only a few trusted allies with them. The rest of the movement would have to continue without them, at least for the time being. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but Jaden knew it was the only way to keep the fight going. He had started something, and he couldn't let it die now. Jaden sat in the dimly lit room, the weight of everything pressing down on him. He stared at the computer screen, watching as the world continued to turn without him. The Future Forward initiative was no longer just his project. It had become a symbol for millions of people who were desperate for change. And now, more than ever, Jaden knew the fight was far from over. But the real question was, how could he keep it going when he wasn't even sure who he could trust? The decision to go into hiding had been difficult, but necessary. After the expose, the shadow operation had gone into overdrive. They had resources, manpower, and an almost infinite reach. Jaden and Sarah were no longer just targets for disinformation campaigns. They were targets for elimination. But Jaden couldn't just sit idle. Even in hiding, he had to ensure that the initiative survived, that the fight continued. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah's voice broke through the silence as she approached, her face a mask of concern. Despite their isolation, she was determined to stay by his side, as they both understood that the movement had no chance if they were both silenced. Jaden looked at her, eyes tired but resolute. "We've come too far to stop now. If we let them win here, everything we've worked for will be lost." Sarah nodded. She knew it was true, but she also knew how much danger they were in. They couldn't be reckless. "We need to regroup. We need to know who's still on our side. We need allies who haven't been corrupted or compromised." Jaden leaned back, thinking, "I've been working on that. There are still people out there who believe in what we're doing. We just need to find them." Days turned into weeks as Jaden and Sarah moved between safe houses, never staying in one place for too long. The tension was palpable, but they couldn't afford to let their guard down. It wasn't just the physical danger that weighed on them. It was the emotional toll of being apart from the world they had worked so hard to create. Meanwhile, the global movement was alive and thriving without them. The Future Forward initiative had become a rallying cry for people everywhere. There were protests, rallies, and support groups springing up across countries, all determined to bring about the change Jaden had promised. But as the movement grew, so did the efforts to tear it down. The shadow operation had infiltrated the highest echelons of global power. There were whispers of international manipulation, of media being controlled, of finance being used as a weapon. The conspiracy ran deep, and Jaden and his allies knew it wasn't just about tech companies anymore. This was about the very fabric of society. One evening, Sarah returned from a meeting with a former ally, her face grim. "I've got something," she said, throwing a folder onto the table. "It's a list of people who've been working against us from the inside. They've been orchestrating everything, and I think we know who's behind it." Jaden opened the folder and scanned the pages quickly. His eyes narrowed as he saw names of influential figures, people he thought were on his side. CEOs, politicians, even public figures he'd once respected. It was worse than he had imagined. This was no longer just a corporate conspiracy. It was a full-scale operation to dismantle the entire initiative. "They're everywhere," Jaden muttered, the weight of it all hitting him. "They've got connections we can't even begin to understand." Sarah's expression hardened. "But we can expose them. We just need the right leverage." Jaden's mind raced. He had the leverage. He had been gathering it for months. But now, it was a matter of timing. One wrong move, and everything they had fought for could collapse. They couldn't just rely on traditional methods anymore. They needed to outthink the opposition at every turn. "We have to go public again," Jaden said suddenly, his voice sharp. "We've been in the shadows for too long. The world needs to know what's really happening." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? They've already tried to destroy us once." "I know, but they'll never expect us to come out like this. They've been waiting for us to make a mistake. But if we can stay one step ahead, if we can get this information out there with the right backing, we can take them down." The next phase of the plan was risky, but necessary. Jaden and Sarah, using encrypted channels, sent out the evidence they had collected: financial records, communications, and insider accounts. They sent it to journalists they trusted, people who had remained neutral or sympathetic to the cause. The timing was crucial. They couldn't afford to give the opposition time to cover their tracks. As the first leaks hit the press, the world erupted. The media went into overdrive, publishing exclusive after exclusive. But the response wasn't what Jaden expected. Instead of just discrediting him, the world began to turn. People began to ask questions, to demand accountability from those in power. Governments, tech giants, and even global organizations were put under the microscope. And for the first time, they didn't have an answer. But the victory was bittersweet. As the leaks continued to flood the media, Jaden knew they were running out of time. The shadow operation was now fully aware of their move, and they were closing in. The decision had been made for him. They couldn't fight this from the shadows anymore. They had to confront the conspiracy head-on. Sarah walked into the room with grim news. "They found us. They know where we are." Jaden's heart skipped a beat, but he knew there was no turning back now. They had stirred the pot, and now the forces of the status quo were coming for them. But they had the truth on their side, and they weren't about to back down. "Let's go," Jaden said, standing up and grabbing his bag. "It's time to end this." Jaden stood in front of the mirror, his reflection showing a young man who, just months ago, was full of idealistic hope and optimism. Now, the weight of the world rested heavily on his shoulders. The struggle for the future had turned from an inspiring mission to a relentless battle for survival. As the conspiracy tightened around him, Jaden knew the only way forward was to confront it head-on. Sarah's warning echoed in his mind. "They know where we are. They're closing in." Every moment counted now. There could be no more hesitation. The leak had changed everything. While it had sparked a global uprising, it had also exposed the vulnerability of their movement. The shadow operation was ruthless, and its grip on power stretched beyond what they had imagined. There were no safe places anymore, no safe faces. The people who had seemed like allies turned out to be compromised, feeding information to their enemies. Now, The opposition was coming for Jaden, not only to silence him but to make an example of him, to show the world that no one, no matter how brilliant, could challenge their dominance without facing dire consequences. It was time to act, before they were cornered completely. Jaden paced across the room, his mind a whirlwind of strategies. They had to move, and they had to move fast. They had gathered enough evidence to expose the conspiracy, but the forces against them were well-funded and well-connected. Jaden knew that simply leaking information wouldn't be enough to bring them down. If they wanted to win, they had to hit the opposition where it hurt most, at their core. "That's it," Jaden said suddenly, stopping in his tracks.
What?
Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. "We need to infiltrate them. We need to find out who's at the top of this operation. I've been thinking about it for too long. The power lies in their financial networks. If we can expose the heart of their operation, the people who are truly behind it, then we can take them down once and for all." Sarah was silent for a moment, processing the plan. "You're talking about going straight into the lion's den?" Jaden nodded. "Exactly. We've been playing defense this whole time. It's time we take the offense. We go straight to the source and get what we need." The plan was dangerous, almost suicidal. They couldn't just expose the conspiracy with a few leaks and hope for the best. No, they needed something more. They needed direct access to the highest levels of the operation. But getting that access wasn't going to be easy. It would require precision, stealth, and a network of allies who were still loyal to the cause. Jaden and Sarah began to reach out to their remaining contacts. It was a risky move. Trust was in short supply, and anyone could be compromised. But they had no other choice. They needed help from people who understood the stakes, the few who were still committed to bringing down the corrupt elites and giving power back to the people. They made contact with an underground group of hackers who had been monitoring the opposition's activities for months. These were people who lived off the grid, working in the shadows to expose the powerful forces that controlled the global systems. They were their best shot at infiltrating the financial networks that held the conspiracy together. That night, in a dimly lit safe house, Jaden met with the hackers. They were a diverse group, but all shared one thing in common: a burning desire to bring down the system. "All right, here's the deal," Jaden said, his voice low and focused. "We need you to help us get access to the top financial systems. We need to follow the money trail and expose the masterminds behind this operation. We have the evidence, but we need direct access to their accounts, their networks." The leader of the group, a woman named Laura, nodded. "We've been keeping an eye on them. The problem is, they've got some of the most secure systems in the world. It's not just a matter of hacking into their accounts. It's about getting past layers and layers of encryption." "We don't have time to waste," Sarah interjected. "Can you do it or not?" Laura smiled faintly. "It'll take time, but we can do it. If we get in, you'll have the proof you need." The next few days were filled with tension. The hackers worked tirelessly, tapping into the encrypted communications and financial networks of the shadow operation. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. The opposition was well prepared, and they had set traps to prevent infiltration. But Laura and her team were determined. Every time the hackers broke through a layer, they found more secrets, more evidence that the conspiracy was even deeper than they had imagined. And then, it happened. "We're in," Laura said, her voice filled with excitement. "We've breached their primary financial network. We've got everything: account numbers, offshore holdings, even communications with the people at the top. This is it." Jaden's heart raced. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. "How soon can we get this out there?" Lara's expression shifted. "It's not that simple. Once this goes public, the fallout will be catastrophic. If we do this right, we'll bring down the entire system. But there's a catch." Jaden's gaze narrowed. "What's the catch?" "There's someone inside the group who has been feeding information to them," Lara said. "We've identified a mole, a high-ranking member of your team." Jaden's mind went blank. The mole could be anyone. Someone close, someone he trusted. The thought of betrayal was almost unbearable. That night, as they sifted through the data, Jaden's worst fear was realized. It was someone he never thought he could trust. The mole was none other than his own father, Gregory Musk. Jaden couldn't believe it at first. His father, the man who had always supported his vision, was at the center of the conspiracy. He had been feeding information to the opposition, working with the very people who sought to destroy everything Jaden had built. The shock hit like a punch to the gut. "How long?" Jaden asked quietly, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Longer than we thought," Lara replied. "He's been at the heart of this for months, possibly longer. He's been leaking your plans, your movements, everything." Jaden felt the ground beneath him shift. This betrayal was more than just personal. It was a direct attack on the foundation of everything he stood for. His own flesh and blood had turned against him, and the consequences of that were unimaginable. Jaden's world had just crumbled. The realization that his own father was the mole was like a storm ripping apart everything he had built. He had trusted Gregory Musk, believed in the very values his father had instilled in him. Now, the man who had been his mentor, his role model, had betrayed him in the most intimate way possible. Jaden sat motionless, staring at the screen in front of him. His father's involvement in the conspiracy wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a strategic blow. Gregory had access to resources and connections that could derail the entire movement. Jaden felt a rush of anger and confusion. How could he have missed the signs? Had his father been playing him all along? Sarah, who had been sitting beside him in stunned silence, finally broke the silence. "What are you going to do?" Jaden's voice was cold, distant. "I don't know. He's not just my father anymore. He's the enemy." The anger was simmering, but it was tempered with the cold realization that confronting his father directly might not be the right move. Gregory had already made his choice, and any confrontation might only play into the hands of those who had orchestrated this betrayal. "We have to keep moving forward," Sarah said gently, understanding the weight of the moment. "We can't let him stop us." Jaden knew she was right. He had spent his whole life believing in a vision of change, a vision that now depended on the success of the Future Forward initiative. If he let this betrayal consume him, he'd lose everything. The world was watching, and they needed him more than ever. "We're not going to stop," Jaden said, finally lifting his head. "But this changes everything. We have to be smarter. We have to go deeper underground. If Gregory's involved, then there are likely more people inside the movement who can't be trusted." Sarah nodded. "We'll have to take it to the next level, get the truth out, but without exposing ourselves completely. It's time to go fully covert." The next few days were filled with uncertainty and paranoia. Jaden and Sarah knew they had to act quickly before the shadow operation could spin the situation in their favor. They could no longer rely on leaks or allies. If Gregory was truly involved, it meant that the enemy had eyes everywhere. They reached out to their remaining trusted contacts, the hackers who had helped them infiltrate the opposition's financial networks. But now, they couldn't risk communicating through regular channels. They had to be more careful, more calculated. Every decision was fraught with the potential for disaster. Then, an unexpected ally appeared. It was Marcus, a former executive from one of the major corporations that had been exposed by Jaden's initiative. Marcus had been one of the first to publicly support Jaden, but after the leaks began to surface, he had disappeared from the public eye. Jaden had assumed that Marcus had fallen victim to the conspiracy, just like so many others. But Marcus had his own reasons for going silent, reasons that only now made sense. "We need to talk," Marcus said when he finally reached out to Jaden. His voice was low, urgent. "Where have you been?" Jaden demanded, his voice tinged with suspicion. "I've been dealing with my own demons," Marcus replied, "but I've got something that can help you. You need to understand that there's more going on here than just your father. There's a much larger operation at play. Gregory is just a pawn." Jaden's mind raced. "What do you mean?" Marcus hesitated for a moment before answering. "The conspiracy, it's not just about controlling you or your initiative. They're trying to control the entire global system. And Gregory, he's not the mastermind. He's been working for someone much higher up." Jaden felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Who?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sent Jaden a series of encrypted files, the contents of which revealed a shadowy network of global elites, corporations, and government officials. And at the top of it all was a name Jaden had never heard before. Alaracross. Alaracross was a name that wasn't on any public records, a figure who operated completely in the shadows. She was the mastermind behind the conspiracy, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Everything, every decision, every operation was part of her design. And Gregory, it seemed, had been working for her all along. Who is she? Jaden asked, still trying to process the information. Why have I never heard of her? She's a ghost, Marcus replied. Elara Cross has been manipulating things for decades. She's untouchable, hidden behind a web of false identities and international finance. But she's the one who's been pulling your father's strings, and countless others. This isn't just a fight for power, Jaden. This is a war for control of the world's systems. Jaden took a deep breath, the weight of it all settling on his chest. And what do you expect me to do with this? Expose her? She's practically invisible. Not if we take her down from the inside, Marcus said. We have a chance. There's a way to get to her, but it's going to require everything you've got. We need to find her network, and we need to do it fast. Once the world knows the truth about her, there's no going back. As Jaden processed this new information, he realized the stakes had escalated beyond his imagination. This was no longer just a battle for justice. It was a fight for the future of the entire world. Elara Cross wasn't just a corporate leader or a politician. She was the puppet master, pulling the strings of global events and shaping the course of history in ways Jaden could barely comprehend. But if they were going to take her down, it would require more than just courage. It would require precision, intelligence, and the full weight of the movement they had built. And it would require trust, something that Jaden was no longer sure he could give. Jaden sat in the dimly lit room, the weight of the new information crushing him. Elara Cross wasn't just another powerful corporate executive. She was the architect of a global conspiracy, an invisible force whose influence spread across governments, businesses, and global economies. And his father, Gregory Musk, had been one of her key operatives. Jaden's heart felt like it had been torn in two. His entire world, the foundation of everything he had believed in, had just shattered into pieces. The next steps were critical. With his father's betrayal, Jaden couldn't afford to make another mistake. The stakes had risen beyond what he had ever imagined. This wasn't just about disrupting the system anymore. It was about dismantling it completely. Do we have a way in? Jaden asked Marcus, who had been a source of information, but now, Jaden had to wonder just how much Marcus truly knew about Elara Cross. Marcus nodded, his face grim. We have a lead, but it's not going to be easy. Elara doesn't operate in the open. Her network is built like a fortress, designed to be invisible and impenetrable. But there's one weak spot, a data center she owns in an undisclosed location. If we can get there, we might be able to find something that leads us directly to her. Jaden's mind spun with possibilities. A data center. It sounded like the kind of place where Elara would hide her deepest secrets, the ones that could bring down her entire empire. The problem, of course, was getting to it. And it wouldn't just be any data center. It would be a fortress, guarded by some of the most advanced security systems in the world. So how do we get in? Jaden asked, his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline coursing through him. We need someone who knows their way around high-level security systems, Marcus said. Someone with skills in physical infiltration and digital warfare. That's where Laura and her team come in. The next few days were a blur of planning. The group of hackers that had helped Jaden before was crucial to this mission. They were the only ones capable of bypassing the layers of encryption and firewalls protecting the data center. But it wasn't just about hacking into the system. They needed to get in physically as well. That meant they would need to deploy a team of operatives who were capable of infiltrating the most secure facility they had ever encountered. Laura, the leader of the hackers, became Jaden's right hand in this operation. Together, they began to strategize, preparing to take on the most dangerous mission of their lives. The night before the operation, Jaden stood on the balcony of the safe house, looking out at the dark skyline. Everything had led to this moment. The loss of trust, the shattered relationships, the dangerous alliances. It all pointed to this. He was about to face Elara Cross head-on, and he knew the consequences of failure. Tomorrow, we go after her, Sarah said softly, stepping up beside him. Her presence was a comfort, even though the situation had become so dire. Jaden looked at her, his eyes full of uncertainty. Do you think we can really do this? Can we take down someone like Alara? Sarah's eyes were filled with determination. We don't have a choice. She's been controlling everything from the shadows. If we don't stop her now, we may never get another chance. Jaden nodded, his resolve hardening. We do this for the future, for everyone who's been hurt by this system. The next morning, the team moved out. The air was thick with tension as they prepared for the high-risk operation. Jaden couldn't afford to second-guess himself. This was their best shot at taking down Alara, but it would require perfect coordination, a level of skill none of them had ever used before. They arrived at a remote location, a compound hidden in the mountains, surrounded by armed guards and fortified walls. The data center was buried deep within, like a nerve center for Alara's entire operation. Jaden, Sarah, Lara, and a handful of trusted operatives slipped past the outer security, their movements calculated and precise. The team was a mix of hackers, former military operatives, and intelligence experts. They had all been brought together under one mission: to infiltrate the fortress and expose Alara. They navigated through the labyrinth of corridors, their steps muffled by the thick, high-tech floors. Every door they passed, every turn they took, seemed to bring them closer to the heart of the operation. Lara was in constant communication with the hacker team outside, who were working on disabling the facility's security systems remotely. But time was running out. The team had only a narrow window of opportunity before Alara's security systems would reboot, trapping them inside. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached the heart of the data center, the control room. Lara was the first to approach the computer terminal. She began typing furiously, her fingers flying over the keys. "We've got access," she muttered, her voice calm despite the tension in the room. "But it's going to take a few minutes to extract the files we need." Jaden kept a close watch on the door. One mistake, one wrong move, and everything would be over. Then it happened. The doors to the control room suddenly slammed open. Armed guards poured into the room, their weapons raised. Jaden's heart skipped a beat as they found themselves outnumbered and outgunned. "Get down!" one of the operatives shouted, but the guards were already moving in, surrounding them. Jaden's mind raced. They had come so far. Could they really let it all fall apart now? In that moment, Lara made a split-second decision. "I've got it," she said, her eyes locked on the screen. "I've downloaded the files. We've got everything we need." "Let's go," Jaden shouted, his voice filled with urgency. The team sprinted for the exit, dodging the guards' fire. Jaden felt a burst of adrenaline as they made their way through the compound, narrowly avoiding capture. The mission was a success, but the danger wasn't over. Now, they had to escape. The team barely made it out alive, but they had what they needed. The files contained irrefutable evidence of Alara's global operation, her connections to corrupt leaders, corporations, and officials. It was enough to bring down her empire once and for all. The aftermath of the mission left Jaden and his team breathless, exhausted, but victorious. The files they had stolen contained more than just secrets about Alara. It contained the blueprint for a new world order, one that Alara and her network had been orchestrating for decades. The documents revealed connections between political leaders, international corporations, and shadow organizations, all bound by one unifying goal: absolute control. As Jaden looked at the files, his mind swirled with the weight of what they had uncovered. This wasn't just about taking down one person. It was about dismantling a system that had been built on manipulation, deceit, and exploitation. But despite their success, Jaden knew the battle was far from over. The information they had stolen was the key to toppling Alara empire, but it was also the spark that could ignite a global conflict. "Now what?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with the same sense of urgency that had driven them this far. The operation had been a success, but the threat had only grown larger. Jaden's mind raced. "Now we expose her. We take these files, and we make them public. We reveal everything, who's been involved, how deep it goes. The world needs to know the truth." Lara, who had been working alongside the hackers from the outside, nodded grimly. "It's not going to be easy. Alara has people everywhere. Government officials, military leaders, people who can stop us before we get the chance to make this public. We have to be careful." Jaden knew she was right. The data center had been one of the most secure places they had ever infiltrated, and if the conspiracy was as widespread as the files suggested, there was no telling who would come after them once Alara realized what they had done. For the next few days, the team worked tirelessly to prepare for the inevitable fallout. They set up secure channels to distribute the files to trusted media outlets and allies, carefully planning their strategy to ensure that the information would reach the masses without being intercepted or erased. But even as they worked, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The closer they got to exposing Alara, the more he sensed the tightening grip of her power. It was like a shadow that hung over everything they did, watching their every move. Alara's reach extended far beyond what they had initially realized, and now they were in the crosshairs. The day they chose to release the files, the world held its breath. It wasn't just another leak. It was the truth, raw and unfiltered. The first story hit the press with a bang, and within hours, the entire world was ablaze with the revelations. Government officials denied any involvement, while corporate heads scrambled to distance themselves from the conspiracy. News outlets reported the story, but the narrative was already being twisted in real time. Media organizations loyal to Alara Cross's network tried to discredit the information, calling it fabricated, a desperate attempt to bring down powerful institutions. But the truth was undeniable. Videos, emails, and encrypted documents began to surface, proof of Alara's manipulation of global events, her control over governments, and her financial networks. The evidence was enough to make even the most skeptical observer question everything they had believed about the world. For a brief moment, Jaden allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. They had done it. The system was cracking. The walls of secrecy and corruption were starting to fall. But then, the world exploded into chaos. Protests erupted in major cities around the globe. People were angry, frightened, and confused. While some took to the streets demanding justice, others reacted violently, unsure of what to believe. The world was teetering on the edge of anarchy, as governments scrambled to maintain control. The revelations about Alara Cross had shaken the very foundations of global power, and now, nothing seemed certain. Jaden watched the chaos unfold on the screens around him. He had wanted to expose the truth, to liberate the world from the grip of powerful elites, but he had never anticipated this level of unrest. The files had ignited a firestorm, and the world was burning because of it. "We've set the world on fire," Sarah said, her voice distant as she stared at the images on the screen. "But now what? What happens when everything starts to fall apart?" "We fight," Jaden said, his voice steady, though the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. "We keep pushing. This isn't just about exposing Alara anymore. It's about giving the people the power to take back control." As the world descended into chaos, Jaden and his team were forced into hiding. Alara Cross's reach was vast, and her retaliation was swift. They had made themselves enemies of the most powerful people on the planet, and now, the danger was more real than ever. Despite the risk, Jaden knew they had to continue their fight. The files had exposed the corruption of the system, but there was still much work to be done. The chaos was just the beginning. The real challenge would be rebuilding a world that had been so thoroughly manipulated by Alara and those like her. The people had awakened, but they needed guidance. They needed a leader who could steer them through the storm. And Jaden knew, without a doubt, that he was that leader. But the question was, would he be able to lead them to a better future, or would he become just another pawn in the game? The chaos that followed the release of the files was unlike anything Jaden had ever seen. Protests erupted in every major city, and governments around the world scrambled to maintain control. But the unrest wasn't just on the streets, it was palpable in the air. People were beginning to question everything they had once trusted. The media, their governments, and the institutions that had controlled their lives for so long. The first wave of backlash came swiftly. Governments branded the leaked information as fake news, and key officials were publicly denounced as pawns in a larger conspiracy. Yet, despite their attempts to cover it up, the evidence was too strong to ignore. The more they tried to deny it, the more it solidified in the minds of the people that something massive was at play. Jaden and his team huddled in their safe house, constantly on the move. They couldn't stay in one place for too long. Alara Cross was powerful, and now that she had been exposed, she would stop at nothing to erase every trace of evidence and anyone who stood in her way. They had expected retaliation, but they hadn't anticipated just how quickly Alara would move. Jaden, Sarah, Laura, and Marcus gathered around a table covered in maps, digital monitors, and satellite feeds. They had been preparing for their next move, but every step forward felt like stepping into the unknown. "We need to stay ahead of her," Marcus said, tapping his finger on a map. "She's already mobilizing. There's a plan to go after every key player who's been involved with the leaks. We've seen coordinated efforts in the intelligence community, the military, and corporate powerhouses. And we're on that list," Jaden replied grimly. He knew they were no longer just fighting Alara. They were fighting a global network that had no intentions of playing fair. Lara's eyes flickered across the screen as she pulled up live surveillance footage. "We need to expose her next. The truth is out there, but we need the people to stay focused. If we let her spin the narrative, we lose. We can't just be the ones running. This is a war, and we need to fight back." Jaden stood up, his mind clearer than it had been in days. "We fight, but we do it smart. We use the media, we use every channel we have, and we strike where it hurts the most, right at her base of power." Alara's retaliation was swift and unforgiving. Her mercenaries, hired from every corner of the world, began hunting down key whistleblowers, former employees, and anyone who might be involved in the leaks. Governments that had previously tried to distance themselves from her influence quickly turned their attention to shutting down the protests, with military forces deployed in the streets. The chaos intensified. Yet amid all this, Jaden saw a pattern, one that had been buried in the mountain of data they had extracted. Alara Cross was not just a powerful corporate mogul. She was deeply entrenched in the military-industrial complex. There were plans in motion, plans to escalate the conflict, to bring the world to the brink of war. And in the shadows, her loyalists were making moves to seize control of entire governments under the guise of restoring order. "This isn't just about money," Jaden muttered, looking at the data. "She's trying to ignite a global conflict. The more the world is in disarray, the more she can step in as the solution." Sarah leaned over the table, staring at the information with a sense of dawning horror. "She's using this chaos to install herself as a savior. If she can play both sides, she'll control everything: politics, business, military." "We can't let her do that," Marcus said, his voice hardening with determination. "But how do we stop her when she has all the pieces?" Jaden's mind raced. This was bigger than just exposing Alara's conspiracy. It was about preventing her from taking total control of the world. The team went into high gear, devising a plan that would not only expose the full extent of Alara's manipulation, but also counter her attempt to escalate the conflict. They knew they had to act fast. If they gave her enough time, she would achieve her goal. Laura had an idea. "We've already seen her communication networks. If we can hack into her private encrypted channels and broadcast her plans to the world, we might have a chance. It's a bold move, but if we pull it off, we can stop her before she makes her final play." Jaden nodded. "Do it. We'll create a diversion to draw attention away from the real target. If we can expose her true intentions, show the world that she's not the solution, but the problem, we may be able to take her down." The next night, as the global unrest continued to spiral, Jaden and his team made their move. They infiltrated Alara's private communication hub, a hidden facility deep beneath the surface of an old military base, buried in an isolated part of the world. The mission was high risk, but it was their only chance to strike at the heart of Alara's plan. They moved in under the cover of darkness, carefully bypassing the facility's security systems. Every step felt like a countdown to disaster. Their only hope was Lara's team of hackers, who had prepared a virus that could disable the encrypted channels long enough to broadcast the truth. They reached the heart of the facility, and as Lara began the final sequence to access the system, everything seemed to freeze in time. Jaden's mind raced. One wrong move, one slip-up, and they would be caught, eliminated without a second thought. But Lara's fingers flew across the keyboard, her concentration unwavering. "I've got it," she whispered, her voice tinged with relief. "Now we just need to broadcast." As the team prepared to broadcast Alara's hidden communications to the world, the tension in the air was palpable. The seconds seemed to drag on, each one feeling like a lifetime. The world held its breath, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Just as they were about to make their move, the facility was breached. Armed guards flooded the hallway. Jaden's heart raced. They had been discovered. The clock was ticking. Alara's network had finally caught on to their plan. The sound of boots pounding down the narrow hallways echoed through the dimly lit underground facility. The guards were closing in fast, and the team had only moments to act before they were trapped. Panic flared briefly, but Jaden pushed it down, focusing on the mission. Alara Cross couldn't win, not after everything they had uncovered. Not after everything they had risked. Lara, Jaden hissed, his voice urgent as he watched her fingers hover over the keyboard. Are you almost done? Lara's face was a mask of concentration, her fingers flying over the keys in rapid succession. I've got the code open, she said breathlessly, but I can't broadcast until we're clear of here. If they cut the power or lock us in, we'll lose everything. We don't have time for that. Jaden snapped. He was already moving toward the door, his gun in hand. We fight our way out, then get the message out. We don't leave without it. The plan had been simple. Infiltrate the facility, expose Alara's private communications, and broadcast the truth to the world. But now, with the facility compromised and Alara's guards closing in, the simplicity of the mission felt a lifetime away. The walls seemed to close in on them, the sound of footsteps growing louder. Jaden, Sarah said, her voice tense. We don't have much time. A door at the far end of the hallway slammed open, and a dozen armed guards stormed in, guns aimed at the team. Jaden's mind raced. There was no way out. They had been cornered. We're not surrendering, Jaden said, his voice unwavering. We fight. The gunfire rang out, deafening in the confined space. Jaden and Sarah opened fire first, taking down the lead guards in a series of precise shots. But more poured in, a wave of soldiers flooding the hallway, all under Alara's control. Each second felt like an eternity as the team fought with everything they had, knowing that the truth they carried was the only weapon they had left. Lara's hands were shaking as she continued to work on the computer, her eyes darting nervously between the screen and the door. She was the only one who could stop Alara, but they were running out of time. She needed to finish what she had started. Come on, she muttered to herself, trying to block out the sounds of chaos around her. She couldn't afford to miss this moment. She had to keep going. Jaden's heart was pounding in his chest as he dropped another guard with a precise shot. The sound of fighting, the staccato of gunfire, and the shrill noise of the alarm system filled the air. The corridor had become a battlefield. We need to clear the way for Lara, Sarah shouted, her voice steady but urgent. Jaden nodded. He understood. If they didn't buy Lara enough time, they would all die in this place without anyone ever knowing the truth. He and Sarah continued to fight, pushing forward toward the door that led to the central control room. But the guards were relentless. Lara, how much longer? Jaden shouted as he fired at another guard. I'm almost there. Lara's voice cracked with tension. Just give me a few more minutes. Minutes passed like hours as the battle raged on. Sweat streamed down Jaden's face as he kept firing, protecting his team. But the numbers were overwhelming. They had no idea how many more guards were lurking around the corner. But then, Lara's voice rang out above the noise. Done. I've unlocked the broadcast system. Jaden's eyes widened, his pulse quickening. Do it now. With the press of a button, the room fell eerily silent. The countdown to broadcast had begun. Alert! A voice over the loudspeakers blared. Unauthorized broadcast detected. System breach. It didn't matter. The files they had stolen, the evidence of Alara's plan, was already streaming across every network, every device, every screen connected to the global grid. As Jaden's team continued to hold off the guards, the truth about Alara's world-altering conspiracy spread like wildfire. The guards paused for a moment, looking at their screens, trying to process the broadcast. But by then, it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. Move, Jaden shouted. We're not done yet. But before they could make it to the exit, the ground beneath them shook. The facility's alarm system screamed in terror, signaling that the building was on lockdown. The doors slammed shut, and the walls seemed to close in. The world they had been trying to save was now in turmoil. The broadcast had ignited a firestorm, but the cost had been great. Jaden knew they were running out of time. The lockdown sirens wailed through the facility, a screeching wail of finality. The doors slammed shut, and every exit seemed to disappear as steel gates descended with terrifying precision. Jaden's heart raced as he scanned the corridor, trying to find an escape route, but the room had become a cage. "We need to move. Now," Sarah shouted, her voice tense but full of urgency. She was already moving, taking the lead toward a nearby maintenance shaft. "The longer we stay here, the less likely we are to get out alive." Jaden looked back at Laura. She was still sitting at the console, her face pale but determined. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she watched the monitors, scanning for any changes in the facility's lockdown protocol. "I'm not leaving until I'm sure the broadcast has gone through," Laura said, her voice sharp. "We're not walking out of here if that message hasn't been sent. But if we don't move now, there won't be anything to fight for," Marcus pointed out, looking over his shoulder. "We've got guards coming from every direction. We have to get out before they seal us in here." Laura hesitated, her fingers poised above the keyboard. Finally, she hit a button, and the monitor blinked to life, showing a map of the entire facility. "The broadcast is live. It's going out worldwide. Now we can focus on escaping." "Great," Jaden said, his mind already shifting gears. "Now let's get out of here before the entire facility is crawling with Alera's forces." The team moved quickly, but the walls of the underground base felt like they were closing in. With each step, the tension thickened in the air. Every sound seemed amplified. The rush of their footsteps, the clatter of weapons, the hiss of the ventilation systems. Jaden's mind raced through the possible escape routes, but nothing seemed to offer a safe passage. Sarah led the way through the maze of corridors, her eyes scanning for any sign of weakness in the security system. They had only one goal now: survive and make sure the world knew the truth about Alera Cross. They rounded a corner, and Jaden froze. A group of heavily armed guards appeared at the end of the hallway, blocking their way. "We don't have much time," Marcus said, drawing his weapon. "We're surrounded." "Make it fast," Jaden said, his voice low but steady. "We don't fight unless we have to." Sarah moved first, crouching low and silently slipping around the corner. Jaden followed close behind, his gun at the ready. Laura and Marcus stayed back, keeping their heads down, but their eyes alert. The team moved with military precision, taking out the first group of guards quickly and silently. It was a dangerous dance, but they knew they couldn't afford any noise. Every step had to be calculated. There would be no second chances. But just as they thought they had a clear path, a new wave of guards appeared in front of them, cutting off their escape. The sound of footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Backup was on the way. They couldn't outrun them this time. Jaden looked around, trying to find another route. There was no time left to strategize. He saw an access door to the side, a ventilation shaft that led to a maintenance tunnel. It was narrow, but it was their best shot. "We're taking that way," Jaden barked, pointing to the door. "Now." The team sprinted toward the ventilation shaft, but the guards were closing in. They could hear their heavy footsteps, the rush of air as they charged down the hall. Jaden reached for the door, but it was locked. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling out a small explosive charge from his pack. Laura turned to him, eyes wide. "You think that's going to work?" "I don't have time to think," Jaden replied. "Just get ready." With a swift motion, he attached the charge to the door and stepped back. The blast rang out, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The door crumpled, and the team rushed inside just as a volley of gunfire erupted from the hall behind them. They crawled through the narrow ventilation shaft, the walls pressing in on them. It was dark and cramped, but it was their only hope. They had to get out. There was no other choice. The shaft led them to a small maintenance room, where they finally found a ladder that led up to an emergency exit. Jaden climbed up first, followed by Sarah, Laura, and Marcus. As the last person reached the top, Jaden pushed open the exit door, revealing a bleak, stormy night. They were outside, but the escape was only the first part of the battle. The storm was still raging, both outside and in the world they had left behind. They had no idea if the broadcast would be enough to stop Alara, but they had done their part. They had exposed her to the world. The wind howled as they made their way toward a waiting transport vehicle, their steps quick but cautious. Jaden looked over at Sarah, who was already scanning the area for any signs of danger. "It's not over," she said, her voice grim. "The world knows the truth now, but Alara won't stop until she has control of everything. This is just the beginning." Jaden nodded. He knew she was right. The fight was far from over. But for the first time in weeks, he felt something shift within him. An unspoken hope that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The storm outside howled, its fierce winds battering the transport vehicle as Jaden and his team sped down the winding, rain-soaked roads. The screech of the tires against wet pavement added a sense of urgency to the already tense atmosphere. They had just escaped the clutches of Alara's fortress, but they knew the danger wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "We can't outrun this forever," Sarah said, her voice filled with grim realization. She sat in the front seat, her eyes glued to the rearview mirror, scanning for any sign of pursuit. "We've exposed Alara to the world, but she won't just let this slide. She'll come after us, harder than ever." Jaden stared out the window, watching the blurred world fly by. The truth had been broadcast to every corner of the globe. The information was out there, Alara's plans, her manipulations, her control over the world's most powerful leaders. But the chaos had already begun. People were angry. Some were in disbelief. Others, though, were already taking action. "We've done what we could," Jaden said, his voice low. "Now it's up to the world to decide what happens next." "I don't know if that's enough," Laura murmured from the back seat. She still hadn't fully processed everything that had happened, but the weight of the truth they'd unleashed was starting to settle in. "We've given them the facts, but facts don't always change things. People are fickle. The world isn't just going to sit by and watch this happen," Marcus said, his tone resolute. "The people will rise. They always do when they know the truth. But we have to make sure we stay one step ahead. If we stop now, Alara will crush us." Jaden nodded, his mind racing. They'd made it out, but the danger wasn't over. The world was waking up, but there was still so much left to fight for. Alara's influence ran deep, and she wouldn't take her downfall lightly. Hours passed as they drove through the night, the storm relentless in its fury. By the time they reached the safe house, the team was exhausted, physically, mentally, and emotionally drained. But there was no time to rest. Not yet. The world was watching, and there was still work to be done. Jaden opened the door to the small, dimly lit room. It wasn't much, just a place to lay low, a safe spot for the time being. They couldn't afford to make themselves a target. Not yet. As they settled into the small space, Jaden stood at the window, staring out into the night. His thoughts drifted to the broadcast, to the way the world had reacted. He had expected chaos, but he hadn't expected it to come so quickly. The tension was palpable across the globe, governments in disarray, citizens rioting in the streets. Alara's empire was crumbling, but it wouldn't go down without a fight. "We need a plan," Sarah said, her voice breaking into Jaden's thoughts. "We can't just hide here forever." "We need allies," Jaden replied, his voice firm. "Alara's not going to stop just because we've exposed her. She's powerful, and she has resources. We need to get ahead of her, find people who can help." "We've made a lot of enemies," Marcus said quietly, "but we've also made some allies. The broadcast, it's bigger than just us. People will fight back. We just need to find a way to guide them." Jaden turned away from the window, his gaze meeting his team's. "We take the fight to her. We need to dismantle everything she's built, piece by piece. We start by finding out who else she's working with. And we make sure they know that the world is watching." The days that followed were a blur of movement, planning, and coordination. They reached out to their underground contacts, connecting with former allies of Alara who had turned against her once the truth was exposed. It wasn't easy. Many were still afraid, hiding in the shadows, too scared to act. But as more and more people joined their cause, the momentum began to shift. The broadcast had ignited something in the people, a spark of resistance that couldn't be put out. It wasn't just about exposing Alara anymore. It was about taking back control. The world had seen what she was capable of, and now they were ready to fight. Then, one evening, as they were reviewing their next steps, the unthinkable happened. The news hit hard. Alara Cross had been captured. The world watched as footage of Alara, handcuffed and escorted by military personnel, was broadcast across the globe. The airwaves erupted with reaction, victory, disbelief, and confusion. It was a turning point, one that no one had anticipated so soon. But Jaden knew better than to celebrate too quickly. "Don't let your guard down," Jaden warned, his eyes cold. "Alara's too dangerous to be defeated this easily. This could be a trap. We need to stay on the move." In the weeks that followed, the global landscape changed. Governments scrambled to reassess their allegiances, and the movement Jaden had helped spark continued to grow. But even as Alara was publicly humiliated, the shadows still harbored her loyalists, people who would do anything to restore her power. And so, the struggle continued. As Jaden sat in the safe house, watching the latest broadcasts on the revolution's progress, he couldn't help but feel a heavy weight settle in his chest. The truth had been exposed, but the battle was far from over. Alara may have been captured, but the fight for the world's future was still raging. He turned to his team. They had all come so far, and the journey wasn't over. The stakes were higher than ever, but they had done something no one else thought possible. They had faced impossible odds and survived. They had shaken the foundations of power. Now, it was up to them to finish what they started. "We've only just begun," Jaden said quietly, his voice full of resolve. "The world is watching, and it's up to us to show them what true change looks like." With Alara's capture and the world in turmoil, what will Jaden and his team do next? The future is uncertain, but one thing is clear. The fight for a better world is far from over. Will they be able to unite the people against Alara's remaining loyalists? Or will a new power rise in her place? Share your thoughts and stay tuned for what happens next.